Live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube. Powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Live from downtown San Francisco, this is 95.7 The Game.
Hi again, everybody. I'm watching Tua Tagovailoa, and obviously a replay of the Thursday night's debacle, controversy, injury, concussion discussion, which will obviously be dusted off and talked about, which we will get into a little bit later in the show. Evan Giddings is alongside. What's up, Ev?
Well, way to start the show on a high note, Dan.
Just punch you right in the face. Let everybody know, hey, listen, man, we're not wasting any time.
Yeah, I think too soon, so I'll make one as well. You're making my head hurt with that. Why would you open up the show talking about concussions? I mean, we got week 2 of the NFL. We got the Giants sliding off a cliff. You know, we got a lot of things to get into today, Dan, as far as the Niners are concerned and going around. You know, I do have to come down your road for the Jets in just a little bit. But before we do, I got to ask you, where is your head at, man?
Well, first of all, Tua Tagovailoa, you know me, I'm a bit ADD. So as I was tunnel vision with all my notes in preparation for today's show, out of the corner of my eye, in my periphery, I saw Tua Tagovailoa, and I just had to go there. But we'll get into him and the rest of the NFL in just a bit. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I do want to detail the big game coming up tomorrow. Of course, it's the Niners taking on the Minnesota Vikings. It's a 10 a.m. kick here out on the West Coast. You know the storyline. Sam Darnold taking on his former team, the Niners. San Francisco with a little redemption after what happened last year and that Monday night loss to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. We'll get into all of that. But first, let's do a little baseball. Why not? San Francisco Giants winding down another disappointing season in which they will come up short in terms of getting to the postseason. My big question to you, because you follow this, you and Sam Lubman are on top of this better than anybody here at 95.7 The Game.
I'm just glad I don't root for the team.
Here we go. Yeah, and thankfully you don't walk around with those knee-high orange socks, as that only that man can rock. But are you, if you're the GM, bringing back Farhan? Are you bringing back Melvin? Are you bringing back just Melvin without Farhan, or a variation thereof? What are you doing?
Well, I think both of them are going to be back, and that was kind of the biggest takeaway from the week. I mean, you know, they sputtered. They're a little bit below 500 a few games. I think their playoff percentage has dwindled to below 1%, so they need a Christmas miracle in September to try and figure out if they can get to the postseason. All of that is not really what we're here to talk about. To me, it is about the rest of the season determining what's going to happen next year, and I think it's already been determined. We heard earlier this week Bob Melvin speak with Andrew Bagley of The Athletic, discussing how difficult of a year this was. And Dan, to me, number one, you're not going to sit down for an exclusive, at-length, one-on-one interview if you don't feel like you have job security. You know, you're not going to put out whatever you believe was the reason why the season didn't go the way you wanted it to. You're not going to, kind of dig into your own downfalls if you don't feel like there's a place for you in this franchise in the future. So I do think that Melvin's going to be back next year, and as a result, I also think Farhan Zaidi is going to be back next year. Now, we'll save the conversations of what the season next year could be, the offseason, all the rest, but to me, it was interesting to hear someone like Melvin, who's had some ups and downs as a manager, but overall, he's won close to 2,000 games, I think. He's been a 3-time Manager of the Year award recipient. He described this season as being the most difficult that he has ever had to manage. And I find that fascinating because though this season has certainly been difficult to watch as a Giants fan, for the manager to essentially affirm what we've all been believing, I don't know if you find it damning, Dan. I don't know if you find it just interesting. I don't know if you find it concerning in regards to what next year is going to be. But the remainder of this season, I don't necessarily know what I'm looking for, but I'm certainly hearing things. And I'm hearing something from the manager that is a bit troublesome.
So, just to break it down, layman's terms, you think there might have been some dissension between the two, namely Bob Melvin and Farhan?
Well, Bob Melvin has not always gotten along with the higher-ups. Yeah. That's the reason why he's in San Francisco in the first place. A.J. Preller in San Diego, and he never saw eye to eye. Bob Melvin did not really get along with someone like Manny Machado and the $1 Million Babies that came and just beat his team 5-0.
Which, by the way, now that the dust has settled out there in San Diego, it looks as though the Padres and Preller were right in moving Melvin, because that's a good baseball team. That might have been even better last year with Bob Melvin, who missed the playoffs with that roster.
Well, the Padres are a fascinating case study because 2 years ago they were the NLCS with essentially a lower payroll than last year. and with not as good of a team as last season. But you're right. Melvin might have been the, I guess, ingredient that needed to be missed or taken out of the recipe. But if I told you, Dan, that a team lost Juan Soto, Josh Hader, Blake Snell, and others, and actually got better, I don't necessarily know if I'd turn my attention to the manager. I mean, I really can't figure out why they're so much better this season than they were last year, but that's neither here nor there. It is disheartening as, I think, a Giants fan to watch what happened last night against your best pitcher, Logan Webb, and essentially see the Padres, who are a lot younger, a lot more exciting, a lot more explosive, and their own ace, Dylan Cease, is someone that they've gone out and acquired via trade. So the Padres are in a better position moving forward and presently, obviously, than the Giants are. But I don't know if I'd identify Melvin as the issue. But my biggest question for the Giants is he going to have future issues with Zaidi? Because the other part that was unearthed during this conversation, in my opinion, and is a little bit irksome, is the fact that Melvin at times was second-guessing his own judgment due to this analytically driven, kind of framework that he's been presented with from this front office. And anytime you have a manager thinking about what they're doing too much, I just think it overcomplicates things, and that's not how baseball is supposed to be played.
Here's why I think that he's going to get another opportunity, and I'm talking about Bob Melvin. First of all, when you talk to Andrew Bagley, yeah, you're right. It could be one way of looking at it that he feels as though he has a sense of security. The other way could be that this is an opportunity for some spin, that I'm going to get a chance to convince him, because I don't know if the decision's been made.
Get out in front of things.
But this will be an opportunity for me to convince people that I'm worthy of sticking around. The reason why I think he's coming back is pretty simplistic, and that is because of Matt Chapman gave him a vote of confidence. I think Matt Chapman intimated that I like Bob Melvin, and I want him to be, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, I want him to be my manager. And anytime players have all the clout right now in 2024 to any sport, and I think the fact that Matt Chapman blew into the ear of whomever when he's sitting down with Scott Boras and negotiating with the Giants about his new 6-year contract extension, I think Bob Melvin was a piece of that. So if Bob Melvin comes back, I think Farhan gets another opportunity, simply put, because I think that the GM or the Farhans of the world and the managers sort of go hand in hand. You don't want necessarily to have Bob Melvin and then bring in somebody that he's not familiar with. That never works at any level. So I think because of Matt Chapman, that both of those two are going to get another opportunity. But would you say it's fair now, because a lot of us would talk about this throughout the season and try and describe, is it a hot seat or is it tepid? Is he coming back? Can we all agree that if indeed Farhan comes back and he's on borrowed time, that this thing is scorching hot? You got 1 year to get this thing right. In other words, you got 1 year to get us back to the postseason, and that holds true for Melvin as well.
Well, I don't even think it's just the postseason. Like, I think if Farhan wants to keep, you got to win 90 games. You got to find a way to put together a quality season. You got to win 90 games, and you got to win a postseason series. Just getting into the dance, to me, at this point, with the lack of success over the previous 6 seasons, moving into your 7th season, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. I mean, what are we here for? What are we doing? Now, the one thing that I think Farhan is hoping could not only help the Giants, but also save his job, is the emergence of young talent. And probably the best news that we heard yesterday from the San Francisco Giants was the fact that they promoted their top position prospect, Bryce Eldridge, to AAA. And he had only played 9 games in AA. They're trying to expedite his development because there's not a lot of minor league season left. I think actually the single A postseason starts next week. Double A has already been winding down. They're trying to get a couple of extra games in for him in AAA before he goes to the Arizona League complex and plays in fall ball. But the point is that Eldridge is 19 years old. He's your most recent first-round pick, and he looks like a stud. So someone like that, who's a 6'7", left-handed, power-hitting first baseman, has the potential to be the position player that you've been searching for what feels like the better half of a decade, really since Buster Posey left. And, well, not left, but I guess came into the league. You know, you have not been able to develop as many position players as you would like, especially in the power-hitting category. So someone like Eldridge is a plus. Wiz and Hunt in your minor league system is a plus at this point. Not that they're going to be elite players, but at least there is some sort of hope at this point, because I think the biggest damnation of this regime, Dan, is the fact that we've been promised all these players, and some of them have turned out to be good. Some of them have turned out to have hot stretches, but none of them have turned into franchise-altering players. If I asked you the best homegrown Giant that you are looking at next season and feel like you know exactly what you're going to get from them, I think we saw him on the mound last night, and it's Logan Webb. And that's not a place you want to be when you have one pitcher to essentially sit back and say, all right, well, that's our guy. I mean, there's been nobody else for the Giants, and that's where Farhan has fallen the most short.
Well, I'd be very careful if I'm leaning in on the Eldridges and the Wisenhunts, if that's my future and that's how I'm punching my ticket as far as security, job security with the San Francisco Giants. Simply because...
I don't think he has a choice, though.
Well, he does, in that you got Chapman back. And I mentioned this last week. So that's a cornerstone. It's a foundational piece. Elliot Ramos worked out. So he's now a corner outfielder. What you need to do is, it's not Eldridge, because that's been, if you go down that road again, you know, we've seen him miss on Matos. We've seen him miss on Luciano. That I'd feel more secure if I'm Farhan, that I'm putting my money on a proven free agent. And I mentioned this last week that I think that they're two players away, Willy Adames and Pete Alonso, from being that playoff team that potentially could win 90 games.
But what we've learned is that you can't rely on acquiring the services of big-name free agents. I'm not saying Willy Adames is, Cal Ripken Jr., but I cannot go into this offseason expecting what happened last offseason, which is you walk away with arguably the best third baseman on the market and, of course, the top starting pitcher in the market, because it took you going into spring training and playing hardball with Scott Boras, who completely overshot or outkicked this coverage in regards to the market. The only reason I think they got Chapman and Snell in the first place is because their agent messed things up. Now, they took full advantage of that, and they retained Chapman, and I think you're right that Melvin has a big reason to do with that. I also think he was a reason why Snell felt comfortable signing with San Francisco. But I cannot rely on Farhan Zaidi to continue to do that because he does not have a track record of doing it. So if your saving grace is free agency, I would just approach with a little trepidation.
Well, it's free agency, but it's not Shohei. It's free agency, but it's not Soto, and it's not Aaron Judge. I think it's sort of in that Soler wheelhouse that they can actually attract somebody like, I think Willy Adames is somebody that is sort of in that perfect tier that could attract him out of a smaller market like that of Milwaukee to come to San Francisco for more money, and they certainly have the money. And the same could be said for Pete Alonso. While he's a star, but still not in the stratosphere like that of the before-mentioned Sotos and Aaron Judge, and I think he's attainable. And to me, now that you have Chapman, it's not as chaotic because things are beginning to make a little more sense now that you have your third baseman of the future. You got Bailey, and now it's just go get two more guys, and then the rookies, you're not as reliant on unproven talent like that of Eldridge and Wisenhunt. And if they do work out, well then, that's gravy. But I don't want to be exclusively relying on these kids, especially when I look at the recent track record of the Matoses and the Lucianos of the world. By the way, is Luciano, after that pop-up and the collision with Fitzgerald?
Yeah, that was earlier in the week.
I know that, but what the hell where's he at in terms of his future with the Giants?
Well, I thought that was completely Fitzgerald's fault, if we're being a buck. I mean, he ran from shortstop 50 feet over to try and take a pop-up from the second baseman who was camped.
You're right, but you play baseball. You got to communicate, especially on the infield, and you got to call him off. And while you might be right technically, I think that when you look at the body of work, Luciano is just sort of this guy that is not very demonstrative and has been terrible in the field, especially at shortstop, that you can't necessarily, you can go back and forth, but the one thing that I would pin on him is just, bro, I got this, wave him off. You cannot just simply let that thing hit the ground.
Well, I mean, it's obviously miscommunication that happens between young players. The one thing that I didn't like about Luciano was his body language after. I mean, he just put his hands on his hip. He didn't try and get to the ball. He didn't try and involve himself in the play because he was so pissed that a shortstop basically tried to jack his ball and then ended up dropping it. So once they got into the dugout, they talked it over. I think it was funny that Matt Williams had to break him up.
Sarge.
Big guy, Billy Badass Matt Williams. But I also think it was just a lot of people were putting that in the category of Luciano, can't field, bust, his fault. And I just feel like because Tyler Fitzgerald has been more of a fan favorite, that he's been skating. And to be honest, whether he communicates or not, if you are running more than 50 feet to catch a pop-up, odds are on the infield, there's probably someone there. And I don't care if you hear anybody. I don't care if Luciano didn't say a peep. Use your eyes. Like, the ball is in the air long enough for you to check and see your surroundings. In my opinion, that was completely Tyler Fitzgerald's fault. But it does, I think, it does symbolically let us know where the Giants are at, which is a team that just simply isn't on the same page.
Yeah, when it gets to Fitzgerald, I guess that maybe you know who your second baseman is and you're trying to cover as much ground because you can't necessarily rely on that guy. I don't mean to make any defenses. You're right. I think that technically, most people would side on Luciano that that's his ball. But the fact that the histrionics are not good when it comes to Luciano. But
right. As a player, you have to have at least a little bit of faith in your teammate to make a play. That's why he's a major league player. That's why he's on the field. I don't care if he is not a great, glovesman. I don't care if he is not a great fielder. If you're playing with a teammate, there has to be enough trust in them to make a play. And if he doesn't, then that's on him.
You remember Kelly Leak from Bad News Bears, the original Bad News Bears? He was the best player on the team.
I'm not going to lie. I've only seen the Billy Bob Thornton version.
And so he would catch everything. He was a center fielder, but if there was a pop-up on the infield, because Walter Matthau said, I want you to catch everything. So it created all this dissension within the team of the Bad News Bears. You need to watch the original with Bad News Bears with Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal, who was the wife of John McEnroe. They would later divorce. But John McEnroe, by the way, and his brother.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't cover enough, and we'll get into Tom Brady. I can't wait to get into Tom Brady with you.
Oh.
But they maybe just simply because enough people don't watch tennis, especially, the U.S. Open. I know you do. But you know how critical I am. I don't care whether it's tennis, whether it's rugby, but I love McEnroe and I love his brother. And I love them on the call, especially McEnroe. Your thoughts?
Oh, John and Pat McEnroe, I think, are two of the best broadcasters that ESPN has. And it's so apparent that, like, the chemistry between them is obvious. I mean, they're brothers. But John has tempered himself over the years just enough to still be critical and go after a certain player. But I think that John McEnroe is the fiery one. Pat McEnroe will kind of push him or needle him sometimes to extract that out of him. Also, Patrick is good enough because I love them when they're with Fowler, who I think is actually a better tennis broadcaster than he is a college football broadcaster. That might be a hot take for some people out there, but he's fantastic. But when Fowler is the play-by-play, John and Pat can just go back and forth. Like, you won't hear Fowler talk for 5 to 10 minutes sometimes just because they're talking tennis. But because they have, I think, they're obviously similar, but they're opposed in their strategies, it just creates incredible conversation when they're discussing the storylines or the approaches of particular players. And if you're asking me, and unfortunately ESPN has lost a couple of big-name broadcasters, and they've focused a lot on their Monday Night Football product. I think Buck and Aikman are still elite. But if you're asking me what I would love to just sit down and watch and listen to, I think it's the Manning cast and it's the McEnroe brothers.
The Manning cast, I want to get into them as well. And their analysis of one Brandon Aiyuk.
That was pretty funny.
Eli Manning, sign your contract and get into camp and make that catch. But I'm with you when it comes to the McEnroes. And they're just, John McEnroe is so poignant what it is that he says. And Tom Brady can learn from him. Just get in and get out. And just, it's all about timing. And you're right, Fowler knows exactly how to lay out. What do I always tell you? Less is more. Sometimes you don't even know he's in the booth. You know who did it before him? It used to be on the USA Network, and who was the voice of the U.S. Open for more than a decade was a guy by the name of Ted Robinson. If that sounds familiar, Ted
Oh,
Robinson.
yeah, he used to be the radio play-by-play for the Niners.
Yes, and he was with the San Francisco Giants as well, local product.
So he still does the U.S. Open, but he does more of the preliminary matches. Like when you watch on ESPN Plus or ESPN2 on some of the first-round matches, he won't do the Ash Stadium games. I don't believe he doesn't do the main games, but he'll do the matches that are kind of, like 17 seed versus unranked, or he'll do a lot of the preliminaries. He's really good.
Our man Tyler Fritz, I think I hit you up with a text because I was
Fritzy?
Fritzy is he just had nothing left. But that's it. I mean, when's the last time? Was it Roddick the last time an American won the U.S. Open?
Yeah, 2009, I believe.
Wow. And so that, and the fact that again it's New York City centric and you got all those storylines. I mean, the stage was set. He came up well short. But just getting back to McEnroe, I don't know how we went down this road.
Well, by the way, do you want to hear what Peyton Manning had to say about Brandon Aiyuk word for word?
Do that.
I got it right here.
Man to man, Giddings.
Oh, I want to throw. Aiyuk, he's a little rusty, Pate. He's missed all training camp.
Hey, get signed, get in training camp. There's a reason for training camp. You need it. We need the reps.
Oh.
Get those contracts done earlier so we can get in training camp. We don't drop balls on opening night.
Right, it's probably one thing catching passes, running routes. All of a sudden you're laying out for a pass, full speed, diving. That's why, those happen in camp. You make those, you practice those. That's just a little rusty right there.
You're still catching balls in a high school field from some quarterback that's 45 years old, my age. You're not catching balls from your quarterback. Get signed, get in camp, and we don't drop the ball.
It's funny, but there's a serious undertone to that.
Oh, there is. Also, you hear Eli kind of trying to tug on the chain like, all right, heel, dog.
Yeah, I could do without Eli. He needs to take the sock out of his mouth.
I love Eli.
Yeah, I'm more of a Peyton guy. Maybe I don't listen to it enough, but they're spot on. And I think it's not like Brandon Aiyuk, but the 49ers cannot do this anymore because yeah, you can beat the Jets going away, and thankfully that touchdown was sort of inconsequential, the one that he didn't catch. But if it was a close game, and Brandon Aiyuk drops a ball, if you lose a game because a guy's not in camp or you blame it on the fact that he was rusty or doesn't have the timing with his quarterback, and you're losing games because you can't get guys under contract and on the field in time so that they hit the ground running in week one, and you're losing games because of it, that's very problematic, and it's also very timely when you think about, what lies ahead with San Francisco, and namely one Brock Purdy.
Well, Brandon Aiyuk also had a drop earlier in the game. I know it was kind of dislodged by Sauce Gardner. It was just like a 5-7 yard slant, but he catches that ball last year.
Yeah, but you know what? The last 2 years he's been good.
But how many drops he had last year, Dan?
How many? 2.
He had 2 drops on Monday night.
That was it?
He had 2 drops all of 2023.
Yeah, I just want to go back to, he was good in 2022, but when you look at his body of work in the first 2.5 years in the NFL, he had a case of the drops. He was a guy that, while he could be really good, he also was somebody that would inexplicably drop a ball that was right in his hands. And that happened repeatedly. And you want to know why I know that? Is because Jimmy Garoppolo was the victim of many of those.
Always bringing it back to Jimmy G. Where's our guys going to text in and say, let Jimmy jacket? Let's be honest. So now we're blaming Brandon Aiyuk for running Jimmy Garoppolo out of town.
No, I know Jimmy Garoppolo was an inferior quarterback, but...
I know you guys are both handsome, and so that's why you have an affinity for Jimmy GQ, Dan, but...
I do want to get into Sam Darnold.
Oh, we will.
Oh, man.
We also got to get into Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Or...
Well, let's wrap up.
Can we just do his? Well, we could take Calf out of his name, I guess, because he doesn't have one currently.
I told you last week that Jordan Mason was the guy, and the drop off wasn't that significant, and that you're better erring on the side of caution when it comes to McCaffrey. We'll get into McCaffrey. Want to get into Sam Darnold, talk a little 49er football as they take on the Minnesota Vikings. 2 teams 1-0. The Vikings coming off that impressive win over the New York Giants. San Francisco, of course, we all saw what unveiled on Monday night with their win over the New York Jets. Something has to give. Out in Bank One Stadium, kickoff tomorrow is at 10 o'clock, a short week for the 49ers. But let's just wrap things up with the San Francisco Giants. So I think we're both in agreement that both Melvin and Farhan are going to get another opportunity. We both agree that they are on that hot seat. I've told you what this team needs to do to improve. I think it's pretty simplistic. Go get a shortstop, move Fitzgerald over to second base, and get a first baseman. And namely, it's Willie Adames and Pete Alonso are the two players that could put you back into the playoffs in a 90-win team. What do you think they need to do in terms of improving?
They need their guys to stay healthy. They need their guys to play better. And I think they need to go out and find a couple of bullpen arms. Ideally, you do find a big bat. Ideally, you do find in Pete Alonso. But I'm operating under the premise, Dan, that they are not going to be able to get someone of his caliber. For example, Matt Chapman was signed. I think his extension 6 years, $150 million. If you want Pete Alonso, you're going to have to give him, I think, $200 million.
You can do that.
Well, you can do that, but why would he take your $200 million over somewhere else? That's my biggest question, because I also think that Blake Snell, I was originally in the camp that I thought that he would just pick up his 30, but with the way that he is pitched and as healthy as he's been, along with maybe most importantly the trajectory of the Giants season, I don't think that it's a coincidence that Chapman signed his extension during the season and Snell chose to not when they have the same agent in Scott Boras. I do think that Blake Snell is leaning towards leaving, because I also think that he can get a lot of money on somewhat of a more, not barren starting pitching market, but last year you were going to have to compete with Yamamoto. Jordan Montgomery was coming off a World Series campaign. There was a few more arms in the market last year. I think, well, Corbin Burns wasn't a free agent, but he was a trade candidate, and I think he's going to be eligible. I don't know if it's last year of arbitration or if he's eligible to get big bucks. But the point is that Snell, I think, is going to have less competition in this market and also is going to have, I think, a little more say in where he goes and trying to get in before spring training. So if I'm the Giants, honestly, I am banking, I am begging, I am on my knees praying that these young players that semi-emerge this season and that look like they could be something down the line, I need those players to be those guys. I need Ramos to be a 25-homer player. I need Fitzgerald to be an everyday middle infielder. And I need Matt Chapman to continue to do what he does. Because if this offense is at the same level it is next year, I think we're in for a similar season.
Before we get out of here, one of the deterrents in bringing Pete Alonso to San Francisco is that the Mets could, there's a little pixie dust going on over that's been sprinkled on that team. I don't know if you're following them, but that's a team that maybe makes a run in the postseason this year.
If they can't get Soto, I think they try and keep Alonso.
But yeah. And especially if you know the magic that can happen in New York, and if Alonso is part of that in the postseason, he ain't going anywhere. All right, we're done with the Giants. Let's get into the 49ers, talking a little football. We'll do that next. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, just getting started here on a Saturday morning on 95.7 The Game.
Success is never by chance. You know that better than anyone. So why settle for a marketing agency that gambles with your money?
behind.
Well, play your starters. This whole thing, because it gets really homogenous in the NFL. I think McVay started this a couple of years ago where he didn't play any of his starters in the preseason and they went to a Super Bowl and everybody else is, okay, well, that's the way to do it. Well, I think you need to change that sort of philosophy unless you want to start the season at 0-2, which nobody wants to do, or 1-3 or what have you. By the way, when we talk about Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, you know what I want to throw out there to people like yourself and the cancel culture out there?
I'm a part of the cancel culture?
Oh, no. For the sake of this discussion, you are.
Okay.
Is that let's not just throw dirt on guys and saying that's it. Let's not just have this binary, either you're a number one pick and you're going to lead us to a Super Bowl or you're trash. Look at Baker Mayfield and what he's doing with Tampa Bay. Look at Sam Darnold and what it is that look at Geno Smith. How many times have we just said Geno Smith is trash? That's the end of that.
Wrote him off. He didn't write back.
Obviously bouncing back. We have a tendency to do that when it comes to quarterbacks. I'm not putting Jimmy Garoppolo in that class, but I find it interesting right now that we're finding a rash of QBs that are getting an opportunity in the right system and are able to produce.
Well, I will. Jimmy G's done. His career will never again be featured as a opening day starting quarterback in the NFL unless the actual starting quarterback that a team wants to be their QB1 goes down with an injury. I'm very confident in putting that take out into the world. The other part is, can we please pump the brakes on Sam Darnold a little bit? It is week one.
Well, I've always been a Sam Darnold guy, so you're talking to the wrong person. But for those in the bandwagons that are now into Sam Darnold, yes, address them, not me.
Well, and we can get into him if you want. I also know we got to dig into McCaffrey and how his injury impacts the coming weeks. But I also think, Dan, if you're just looking at backup quarterbacks, you're right. You can't necessarily write off particular players. But Baker Mayfield is, I think, a bit of an outlier because he never really was in a place at the beginning of his career that could kind of feature his talents. Like, his situation does matter. Now, I know he reset a lot of rookie passing records, but after that, he sort of fell off. And then he remade himself in Carolina. McVay helped him a little bit. And then it's just very interesting to me what happens when you get a gunslinger around with a bunch of weapons and you're able to piece it together. You know, I don't think Baker Mayfield is an elite quarterback, but he had close to an elite season a year ago.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think Cleveland would want him now or Deshaun Watson?
Oh, hell yeah. Dude, that's why I also don't think they're going to trade Jameis Winston. I mean, Jameis Winston might be your starting quarterback by week 4 if Deshaun Watson and that $77 million cap hit can't pull his head out of his you-know-what.
Jameis Winston's become like an NFL meme with his... Have you seen his little speeches before the games? He
had a lot of trouble in college. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But he has become somewhat of a likable figure in my mind just because, I don't know, he just seems harmless. Like, he's kind of neurotic and a little strange, but his off-the-cuff remarks during pressers or... I don't know, pre-game pump-up sessions.
That's hilarious.
If you're his teammate, I feel like you can't help but like him because you're not really sure what he's going to say next.
Wait, why are we pumping the brakes on Sammy Darnold?
Because it's been 1 week and you played the New York Giants.
Right, well, here's what I would say about Darnold and why I like Shanahan. And Shanahan had an eye on that guy from day one. And one of the reasons is when you just look at his career. I mean, who in their right mind, if you were drafted by the New York Jets, what was that, back in 2018, number 3 overall, and you go to the Jets, this is pre-Robert Saleh, pre-Aaron Rodgers. You had Adam Gase and that press conference. I still don't know what the hell he was looking at. And then from there, you go to Carolina with Matt Rule. Just imagine for the sake of this conversation that if Brock Purdy, let's just say Brock Purdy was Sam Darnold, and he goes to the New York Jets with Adam Gase in that offense. And let's just say then he goes to Carolina. You think Brock Purdy is Brock Purdy, or is Brock Purdy, parking cars somewhere?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And that's why I'm not going to completely discount Sam Darnold. I just need to see more than one performance against maybe one of the worst teams in the NFL. But you're right. If I'm comparing the two quarterbacks this weekend, it is a glowing example of the fact that situation matters. Sam Darnold in many ways is the antithesis of Brock Purdy. Now, Darnold was the highly touted quarterback out of USC, number 3 overall. Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. But as a result of being the last pick, Brock Purdy finds himself with the most loaded and talented roster in the NFL. And he has maximized it so far in his career, and he's done a hell of a job. But his first season as quarterback, his offensive coordinator was Bobby Slowick. His quarterback's coach was Brian Griese. I'm not even going to get into the Shanahan thing. But both of those coaches that he had to work with are very talented and proven. Sam Darnold, on the other hand, was not just drafted to Adam Gase. Before that, he was drafted to a Todd Bowles team. And his first offensive coordinator, that was his last year in the NFL. He does not have a job and has not had one since 2018. Then you move to Adam Gase, whose career has been made by just an association with Peyton Manning, who's his own offensive coordinator and has now been proven to be somewhat fraudulent as a play caller. So you're right. And then Sam Darnold gets traded to Carolina, where he's basically competing with mediocrity and has to jockey with Cam Newton. And then he moves to the 49ers and now has had to remake his career. Sam Darnold's career looks very different if he's drafted to the 49ers. Do I think he has as much success as Brock Purdy has? No. But they are two very opposite situations. And for Sam Darnold to be a player that was as touted as he was to turn out in the place that he is, you would imagine it'd be converse, that Sam Darnold would be in the position that Brock Purdy is and vice versa. However, because of their draft situations, they're very different. And I would argue polar opposites.
Sam Darnold is in a really good situation for the first time in his career. And it's almost as if when you look about what happened last year, it was the perfect opportunity to allow him to be the starter this year. He was basically an understudy in the same system. And that he goes from, as you just laid out, the chaos in New York and the bad coaching out in Carolina where nobody wins. And then you go to a place where, wow, okay, I got a quarterback whisperer in Kyle Shanahan. This is a place where people win. And for the first time, he begins to do things the right way. And he's almost like one of those guys who's like pre-med, just learning. And that sets the stage for him to go to, now, I know that Kevin O'Connell and Shanahan aren't necessarily linked together, and Kevin O'Connell isn't out of that Shanahan tree, but he is out of the McVay tree, right? He was the OC, the offensive coordinator with the Rams, and then he gets the opportunity with the Vikings, and we all know that McVay and Kyle Shanahan cut from the same cloth going back to their days, whether it was Washington or even before that. So the offenses are very similar. So he gets an opportunity to basically sit in the classroom and learn last year as the understudy, and now he gets an opportunity to be the number one in Minnesota. Do I think that he'll have a good game? I do, but I still think that Minnesota collectively is an inferior team to that of the San Francisco 49ers.
Well, I don't think anybody would doubt that, but he does have the benefit of having the best wide receiver in football, or second if you like Tyreek Hill. But, this weekend he's not going to have Jordan Addison. He's not going to have as great of a defense as he would have if he was a starter for, say, the San Francisco 49ers. No, like the Vikings are an inferior team, and the 49ers, quite frankly, should handle them tomorrow. But the one, I think, glimmer of hope is that it is a coaching battle. Like that to me is what could lead the Vikings to victory, because talent-wise, they are not in the same stratosphere as the San Francisco 49ers. But Kevin O'Connell, I believe, is a damn good play caller. And I also think that Brian Flores is somewhat of an understated defensive coordinator. And what he was able to do last season to a Niners team that was missing a couple pieces with Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, he was able to confuse Brock Purdy a little bit. But this is also where I think Brock is different than Darnold. So I wanted that soliloquy about situation and how it does matter. But Brock Purdy so far in his career has been a quarterback that has not necessarily, he doesn't make mistakes two times. He learns quickly, and I think he's more cerebral than a player like Sam Darnold, though he might not be as talented physically. I don't think that Brock Purdy's going to struggle with Brian Flores tomorrow, because though Flores he's been compared by some with the way, kind of like Jim Schwartz, who gives Kyle Shanahan fits. He's been put in that class as a DC. But Brock Purdy is somebody that I think once he goes through it, has shown that he's able to learn from his mistakes. And so I think he'll be able to handle whatever Flores and the Vikings throw at him tomorrow.
Yeah, Flores really disguises things really well. And he gives you different looks. And he also likes to blitz, like those zero. But he brings that. I love that. When you just bring everybody, man. And he did that on a couple occasions and got burnt last year against the Niners. But, yeah, you're right. I think somebody said this, that Brock Purdy can go through a progression 1 through 5 faster than anybody currently in the NFL. I mean, he's a cerebral, smart quarterback. But even Brock Purdy, and listening to him in his post-game comments this week, was talking about his timing being off. I think that was a good game by Brock Purdy, but in the second half, he looked a little off. I mean, he missed some guys. And I know that he overthrew and aired one out to Juwan Jennings. I think he dirted one on an attempt to, I believe it was Brandon Aiyuk. And he talked about, I need to get my footing right. Like, I need to get up in the pocket. I'm paraphrasing here. But he was talking about how I need to adjust in the pocket. All those little subtleties should have been taken care of before the start of the season. And that, I think, is sort of what you're seeing throughout the NFL, is that, thankfully you win a game and that you can eventually, get knee deep and start to wade into the season and then eventually hit your stride, a month into it. But you can't do that at the expense of losing games. So I think everybody, including the Niners, need to readdress how it is that you perform in the preseason and how you go about things during camp, whether it's more reps or more game speed or playing the ones. Because even Brock Purdy admitted in what was sort of a lackluster second half at times, although that dime he threw to Brandon Aiyuk was amazing, despite Aiyuk dropping the pass. But even he admitted that my footwork is a little off.
Well, I mean, I think, it's not just a Purdy problem. I think it's league-wide. The rookie quarterback that everybody was excited to watch, Caleb Williams.
Trash.
Well, but his line looks a lot better if Keenan Allen catches a touchdown. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, he completed 9 passes. He wasn't very good. But similar to Purdy, the line looks different if someone is able to haul in. By the way, Keenan Allen was also somebody who did not play in the preseason whatsoever. So he's a veteran receiver. I think he's one of the better wideouts in the NFC. But he didn't have preseason. He's sloppy. So
yeah, but Caleb was bad. I know the play you're talking about.
Well, no, they didn't win the game because of Caleb Williams. They won the game because of their defense and special teams. Yeah. But again, it's like, the line, I think, is a little bit more forgiving if your receiver catches a ball. So, I don't think Purdy looked incredible, but this is also where he has the benefit of being able to feel out a game, because Purdy does not have to do as much as other quarterbacks all that often because of the talent on his team and also the reliance on, say, an unsung running back or a defense that is just making Aaron Rodgers' life absolute hell. But I think Brock Purdy does get some credit for me in the regard that, unlike other quarterbacks, he does have a feel for the game that I don't think other quarterbacks have, as to say he knows what it takes to win. And so he's not going to step outside of himself unless he absolutely needs to. Now, there's privilege in that because he has the privilege to look around the game and say, well, if I just take care of the ball, we're not losing this game. Like, there's no way that the Jets can beat us unless I throw 3 interceptions. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm not putting the ball in harm's way, which is why you might have seen some of those balls come out a little bit flat or maybe not on the same page. But at the end of the day, if you're telling me Brock Purdy had, I would say, like a B- game, maybe a B, and they still won going away,
yeah,
that's a pretty good place to be.
What Brock Purdy is? He's the quintessential Kyle Shanahan quarterback. And that's the only sort of prism by which you have to look at this. This whole idea, he wouldn't work here, or he's a system quarterback. Well, yeah, he is a system quarterback. And he's in the perfect system to execute what it is that Kyle Shanahan wants to do throughout the course of a football game. Since he's been in San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan has never had a quarterback that can do all the things that Brock Purdy's able to do. Is Brock Purdy, does he have the strongest arm in the NFL? Does he have as strong as arm as Sam Darnold? No. Does he have the ability to run like some of the players like the Lamar Jacksons or other players in the NFL that play his position? No, but can he do enough of both? Yes. And it's not about that. It's just about executing what it is that Kyle Shanahan in his innovative passing scheme wants to do, and he's the perfect guy for it. So all the conversations about, I wouldn't pay him that much money or he wouldn't work over here, he's not a top-tier quarterback. Stop. Who the hell cares? Kyle Shanahan only cares about one thing: who's going to execute what it is that I want to do. Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't do it. He would at times, but then when it counted the most in an NFC championship against Green Bay, he's like, listen, you're handing the football off because I'm not going to have you lose this thing after we come this far. You're throwing the ball exactly 7 times today. Trey Lance, you're not the guy. Finally, I found a guy, and I don't care that he's Mr. Irrelevant, but he can do everything that I ask. Shallow cross, put it on that outside shoulder. If I need you to extend a play, he can do that just enough. Does he know where to go with the football? Yes. Can he go through his progressions? Yes. Perfect. That's all Kyle Shanahan's asking for. And as 49er fans, you just need to see it through that lens. He's the perfect guy for the head coach of the Niners to execute what it is that they want to do.
Well, I do think there are a lot of guys that could be the perfect guy for Kyle Shanahan, but Brock Purdy has the...
Why can't you just agree with me one of these days?
Well, I think we agreed on the Giants in the first segment, and so after we're done, then we can move on. No, I think there are a lot of, quote, perfect quarterbacks, but you're right in that Brock Purdy has the requisite skills that I think Shanahan looks for, and that is primarily just situational awareness. Like, I think Brock Purdy's situational awareness is his biggest asset, and the computer up top, like that's where he makes his bread, or will make his bread in about a year. But I mean, I don't want to go as far as to say that other quarterbacks wouldn't be perfect in the Shanahan system. I think Brock Purdy is a very, very good quarterback, and if Kyle Shanahan has a very, very good quarterback, he can turn them into a great quarterback. That's how I read it.
Like, I think Shanahan, he'd love to have a Josh Allen, but I don't know that. I think that, like, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow would be a perfect quarterback. But there's certain quarterbacks who are really good and really elite. Somebody had an issue with me using the word elite, but some of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL, there could be somewhat of a struggle because good quarterbacks want to do things on their own sometimes. Like, they want to get to the outside. They want to extend plays. And Kyle Shanahan's just, like, believe in the system. That's why he coveted Kirk Cousins. Like, he doesn't necessarily, he's not looking for that blue chip 5-star best quarterback in the NFL necessarily. I mean, he'd love to have him. Patrick Mahomes, sure.
Well, I think he traded up to try and get one.
Trey Lance?
Yeah, Trey Lance wasn't that guy, obviously, but it wasn't as if he didn't attempt to go get one. He just hasn't had an like, the reason why Kyle Shanahan hasn't had a chance to get a top-flight quarterback is because the majority of those quarterbacks are in the top half of the first round, and where the Niners never been outside of one season at the top end of the first round. Well, I guess you could say 2018, but like as he was building, I'm saying once they become competitive and Shanahan has had a chance to have his players in his system, you don't have a chance to go get a top-flight quarterback because, to his credit, Shanahan has won pretty much double-digit games every year he's had a full roster.
He's done it with Matt Ryan. He wanted Kirk Cousins, and now I think he's just very content with Brock Purdy. And, you talked about Trey Lance, something that I want to get into as it relates to Trey Lance. And I do have a bone to pick with Kyle Shanahan. We'll get into the conversation of Christian McCaffrey. We can start it now and continue in the next segment.
Got a bone to pick.
Well, with Kyle Shanahan,
you were mad at me,
and running the football with Deebo Samuel, like, what the hell's going on here?
He's a running back,
but he's not.
Wait, where's number 1 now? That's more of a running back.
I like
number.
that. That looks slick.
Although not a big fan of the senior on the jersey. It just looks kind of weird. Not gonna lie. Also, the fact that did he change his Twitter name to 1 Problems? Because he was 19 Problems, which sounds so much cooler. I'm just saying, Deebo. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze when it comes to the jersey. What do you think, Carter?
I didn't know that Deebo actually has 19 tattooed on his back. Did you know that?
I did not know that either. Well, so is he going to get the 9 removed, or?
That's why you never get your jersey number tatted and a name. Like, I don't have any tattoos, but when I was thinking about it, I dated this woman from Brazil when I was a young man, and I'm like, I'm going to get Nada. I'm in love with this woman. I was like 21.
This guy.
And I'm like, I got to put Nada somewhere on my body. And I remember this guy, he was my photographer, and I was a sportscaster in Fresno, a young fella just out of college. And he's like, let me tell you something. Don't ever get a name. I'm like, no, Nada's going to be with me forever. Like, this is a lifetime thing. Like 8 months later, I was dating someone else, and I was like, bro, thank God I don't have Nada on my body for the rest of eternity.
To be fair, there is a difference between getting a number tatted on you that you literally can control whether or not you have, and getting the name of a woman tattooed on you, which you also have very little say in. Well, I should say you do have very little say in, because she could just walk out on you any day, as I've learned a few times.
All right, by the way, she now lives in one of the greatest names. We'll get to a break. The greatest name for a city. It's in Brazil. And I just love saying it. Bon Jesus. That's where she lives.
Bon Jesus? Or
Bon Jesus, yes.
Bon Jesus. Oh, yeah, because I'm assuming they speak Portuguese there.
Portuguese, yes.
Yeah.
But Bon Jesus. Where are you from? I live in Bon Jesus, baby. All right, we continue. We're going to talk about the 49ers. I do want to tell you why Deebo Samuel as a running back really concerns me. We'll do that and much more when we continue with Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, Big Chick, right after this on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, it's Willard and Dibs for Safeway. Enjoy these amazing deals for members. And as always, earn 4 times reward points on hundreds of exclusive offers with your Safeway app. This week, Lucerne shredded or chunk cheese, 32-ounce size, or...
out of me. And also a short week where it's not like you're going to LA or Seattle, but a short week where you have to go and change time zones. I think that could be problematic, especially when you think about the game they just played against the New York Jets and all the buildup and the hype and the anticipation throughout the entire offseason. The minute that was put on the schedule, the storylines, they are in Rodgers, it's the Jets and the 49ers and this big story. And then after the win, do you concern yourself that maybe just some air left the room and in a short week that this could be a cocktail that could create a dangerous outcome against the Minnesota Vikings coming up tomorrow?
Well, I think those factors are why you see the line around 5.5 or 6, instead of it being a bit more inflated. Like, I think the biggest line this week is the Ravens -9 against the Raiders. And that's probably where this line would be if it was in San Francisco, because I just think that the Niners are wholesomely a more talented group than the Vikings. I do wonder how they come out, though, because against the Jets, they were a little flat, and I thought the preseason might have showed a bit. But once they got their grounding and put the ball on the ground, quite frankly, the game was over. And I think that they're going to try and do that again. They're just going to test Minnesota's front line, who last season tried to combat McCaffrey with, I think they put like 5 or 6 defensive linemen on the front. I mean, they just basically eliminated the run. So I think they're going to try and force Brock Purdy to beat them in this game. And I think Brock is going to be able to do it where he was not last year. So, the Niners, those factors, I think, do weigh a little bit for me. The early start, East Coast trips are a little bit more difficult than the Midwest. But, Dan, this is a no-excuses football game. Like, if you're the Niners, you should, and you have to beat, well, I guess you don't have to, but you should beat the Vikings. And I think they should handle them. If they handle the New York Jets, who I think as a whole are a better roster, they're a better team than the Vikings, they should be able to get this one done.
So I just want to get back to Deebo Samuel, and here's the concern I have with him being like, is he the number 2 now, I guess? Is that what we're putting him? Where's Garendo?
Oh, running back, you mean?
Yeah, is he number 2 behind Mason right now?
Well, Kyle Shanahan has always been reluctant. I think a lot of coaches are, but Shanahan specifically, he's reluctant to use rookies. And so I think in game 1, you weren't going to see Garendo as the backup running back.
Well, why have him on the roster then?
Well, in case someone goes down, like if Mason got hurt during the game.
Well, McCaffrey went down. So next man up, Garendo. You're getting an NFL paycheck. I know you're a rookie, but brother, we're going to go. Look, I like Deebo.
What if I told you we'll see him this week? I think
you will.
I think he'll tote the rock this week.
But I think the idea of Deebo Samuel, in all seriousness, getting the ball. Look, I like the ball in his hands as much as anybody else, but I like it more on a jet sweep. I like it more on a gadget, sort of how they'll use his Cowling kit, I think, where he can use his speed and being a little bit creative. When he's the lone setback and he's sitting behind Brock Purdy and then he's going A-gap, like he's going right off the guard's ass. I've never seen a quote-unquote wide receiver get hit in the knees as often as I did Deebo Samuel in that game. I'm like, Deebo with his injury history, and we're thinking about a long-term play with him, and he's going right up the gut as frequently as he did as the featured running back. I grimace. You know what it reminded me, and I mentioned Trey Lance earlier. Like I told everybody on the air, first of all, I was out on Trey Lance as a quarterback, and secondly, I said, this idea of when Trey Lance won the job, and in week 2 against the Seattle Seahawks, Kyle Shanahan clearly didn't have confidence in him throwing the football, so what he wanted him to do was run more RPO than we've ever seen a Kyle Shanahan offense and a quarterback use. But it was because Kyle Shanahan had lost complete security in this guy getting into 5- and 7-step drops. And I said on the air, like, he is going down with an injury. This is not sustainable. Like, maybe some RPOs occasionally as an element of surprise, but running Trey Lance off tackle or in that A gap or between the tackles or in the scrum, so to speak, you can't do that in 2024. Somebody's going to square you up. And sure enough, he goes out with that ACL tear. And of course, the rest is history. Jimmy Garoppolo comes in. He gets hurt against Miami, opens the door for Brock Purdy. And here we are. But the same can be said to a certain degree when it comes to Deebo Samuel. I think if Deebo Samuel continues to be the lone back and he's going right up Dom Pooney's butt, like, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I also don't think we're going to see that as much as we did on Monday night because, again, I think it goes back to how Shanahan approached the preseason. He didn't play a lot of his starters outside of the final week. I think there was more emphasis on the rookies getting reps. But in the regular season, I just think he's reluctant to use those younger players as much at the beginning of the season. So do I expect Deebo Samuel to get 10 carries or close to 10 carries again? I don't. I also don't expect Jordan Mason to get 29 carries, which is the most a running back has ever had under Kyle Shanahan in the regular season. Because I also don't think Shanahan was aware of how much he was using both those guys. Literally after the game, or maybe it was during the week, he was talking during one of his press conferences. He said he didn't know that Jordan Mason had 29 carries. Now, I understand if you don't, as a head coach, keep track of how much you use guys throughout your career. You've been there for a long time. He clearly wasn't aware that that was the most carries a running back had ever had under his tutelage as head coach. But to not know that you're running a guy more than 25 times, to me is, I don't get it. Like, Kyle Shanahan has an equation, and in his mind, what's going to work is what's going to work. And against the Jets, clearly he was running the football. Let's just continue to feed Jordan Mason. He's a big back. He's ready. He's in great condition. And we're just going to ride him. You can't do that every single week. It's the same reason why I believe we're talking about Christian McCaffrey having an Achilles strain, because Kyle Shanahan has run him into the ground since the moment they acquired him. And he's been a revelation. And the Niners' winning percentage has been just as good with Christian McCaffrey, pretty much as has been with Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo and all the rest. McCaffrey's a game changer. But when you use a player that much, there's a residual effect from it. There's a consequence. And for Jordan Mason to be in his first year primarily toting the rock, which I think he'll have to do not only this week, but it sounds like for the coming weeks as well, I do think that Kyle Shanahan is going to have to look in the mirror and say, all right, there's a reason why we got this guy Garendo. There's a reason why we've kept our running back room as wide as it has. And even if it's Deebo being involved, I just think there needs to be a more even distribution, because I don't want to see him just basically use up Jordan Mason because he doesn't have McCaffrey.
I agree with you, but I don't think it should deter you from not running the football, because you can get a multitude of guys back there and be effective, as they did that year they went to the Super Bowl the first time against the Kansas City Chiefs, and you had that three-headed monster. Was it Mostert, Breida, and Coleman, essentially? Yeah. And it was whoever had the hot hand, they would ride. And getting back to something like that, if Mason continues to prove that he can be a number one, or at least be a running back that you can count on, to see the load being divided between those two, and let's see what Isaac Garendo can do. And if you got three guys back there, that's ideal for, I think, someone like that at Kyle Shanahan. I like the idea of running a football. I just don't want to see it with Deebo Samuel. Stop with that. If you want to give Deebo the ball, we all love Deebo in open space, but I don't like Deebo going off tackle or off guard or being, Larry Zonka and trying to bull people over like that. That to me is just, that's scary. And it should scare every 49er fan, because Deebo didn't play in that game against Minnesota a year ago, and Trent Williams didn't play in that game. That's a game they lost to the Vikings. He's one of those guys that you take out of the equation and you're not as good a football team. I think you can win, as they prove, without Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey's a great, listen, he's the reigning offensive player of the year. He finished third in the MVP voting a year ago. I don't need to tell you what it is that he's able to do with the football and how good of a football player he is. But I think you can win without McCaffrey. I don't know if you can win without Deebo. And he certainly can't win without Trent Williams. Well,
if you can win without McCaffrey, I think you can win without.
Well, I'm just
Deebo.
looking at the recent track record.
True. No. That's true. But we also haven't really seen the Niners without Christian McCaffrey. I don't know. I think the reliance on the run game is where the 49ers are basically able to overcome. But the thing about week one is also it's a stylistic matchup, right? Like, the Jets have an incredible pass defense. So using the idea is to get Deebo the ball. It doesn't matter how. It could be on the ground. It could be a bubble screen. God forbid he has to run a route beyond 15 yards. But you want the ball in his hands. Okay, so if you're telling me Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed are on the outside, Deebo's not the greatest one-on-one wide receiving winning guy. So you got to find a way to get him the ball somehow. And I think the easiest way to do it is just to line him up in the backfield and give him the ball. Like, just
straight
hand it
ahead?
off. Just hand it off.
I think you can get a little bit more innovative. It's Kyle Shanahan, for crying out loud. Just like simply saying, here's the ball, go, run right up Highway 71, Trent Williams. That just seems to be like getting up and in there against the big uglies is not utilizing, I think, Deebo Samuel at what could be his most effective.
Well, when they got creative, Deebo nearly, I think they were trying to run like a reverse wide receiver pass back to Brock Purdy, and then that ended up going nowhere. Like, I hear what you're saying, and yes, there's a lot of bodies banging around and pinballing in between the tackles, but if you have an advantage, that's what you try to exploit. And I think that Shanahan is one of the best, if not the best in the NFL, at figuring out where the weaknesses are in opposing defense and just attacking it relentlessly. Now, I think that also is a reason why he might not be aware of how many carries he's giving his running back, because in his mind, it doesn't matter. He's so siloed in on what the game plan is, and the Jets could not stop the run, especially in the second half. So what are we going to do? We're going to run the ball, and we're going to run it between the tackles. So if you are the 49ers this week against the Vikings, I think that Brian Flores is going to try and take away the run. So that means there is going to be more pressure on Brock Purdy. And I don't know if we see as many carries from Deebo Samuel between the tackles. Maybe we see him a little bit more on the outside. We see Brock Purdy trying to get the ball out quick more like he did in the second half against the New York Jets, as opposed to kind of like a slow start in the first quarter. But, I mean, I don't like Deebo running the ball more than he has to. But without McCaffrey, this is going to be the trickle-down effect that the Niners are going to have to figure out how they manage. And they're going to have to load manage this season. I don't think it's as much about regular season wins as it is about getting to the postseason healthy. And that's where week one was a little bit, I don't want to say concerning, but if it continues, then concern does start to set in. Because if Mason is getting 30 touches a game, if Deebo is getting 10 carries a game, I think eventually, come week 10, we're looking at some guys with some very heavy legs and a lot of banged up bodies.
Remember Deebo, was it 3 years ago now? Or was it 2 years ago?
2021.
How creative he was just before he signed his contract.
Yeah, it was in 2021.
How creative he was, especially in the postseason against Dallas. They just needed the ball in his hands. And Kyle Shanahan was Kyle Shanahan. He got really innovative in drawing up these X's and O's of how he could utilize just simply putting the ball in the hands of Deebo Samuel and letting him do Deebo Samuel type things, who I think is the greatest open field runner as a wide receiver I've ever seen. But just simply like saying, okay, go off that A gap and make it happen. I don't know about, was I the only one that was grimacing every time he would just get the ball and run straight ahead? Because to me, he's still a wide receiver. Like I look at him, I'm like, that's a wide receiver going up and inside. What are we doing? Maybe once, but not 8 consecutive times, but his 8 carries were probably in that same zone. Like I was like, he's a wideout at the end of the day. What's going on here?
Yeah, but he's also a heat-seeking missile. I think one of the things that...
In space, he is.
Well, but he's also he's just a bruising player. I mean, and the Niners are a bruising football team. I thought they snatched the souls of the Jets by basically just running the ball straight at them. And if there's one thing that can kill an opposing team's morale, it's knowing that the opposing, that the Niners, for example, are going to just line up and run the ball.
Oh, I agree with
and there's
you.
nothing you can do about it. I mean, that is the most demoralizing part of a football game, watching as an opposing fan, seeing your team not being able to stop the run. And Deebo Samuel is a part of that. I understand he typically doesn't do it as a running back, but also remember in that 2021 season, the reason why I didn't like Deebo running the ball as much as he did is because it was week one.
Exactly.
The first week of the season. If you remember that year, Deebo began to tote the rock a lot more the second half of the year. He's primarily used as a wide receiver the first half of the season. I think he had something like, what was it, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 yards? I mean, he was a damn good wide receiver the first half of that season, and then Mike McDaniel helped get him into that running back mode, and that completely opened up their offense. I don't think they need to do that every single game, but Kyle Shanahan clearly, with the absence of McCaffrey, and maybe it wasn't planned, I'm not sure, but with the absence of McCaffrey, adjusted, and Deebo was a big part of that.
Listen, Isaac Guerrero, kid out of Louisville, you're equipped to play this position, the halfback, running back. Like that's what you learned to do, okay? You've been doing it for a while. Same with Jordan Mason. You know, there's you know the angles to take, how to take those hits. So Guerrero, get the carries. Deebo Samuel's a wide receiver. Yes, he can bounce off of guys and he's strong, but he's still a wide receiver learning to play that position and get the ball in his hands. I just have an issue with him being, just much like that of Trey Lance. I know Trey Lance was a remarkable player back in the day in terms of what he could do with his feet, and Kyle Shanahan got excited with the RPO, but putting him in between tackles, it was just a matter of time before he got dinged, and then sure enough. I do want to get into, first we're going to hear from our man Austin, who's standing by out in San Jose. But
also to your point, Dan, by the way, it's like if you're looking at, 8 carries week 1, if you're telling me he's going to get 5 to 10 carries every single week, I don't want my running back rushing the ball by the end of the season over 100 times.
Well, I don't mind if he's getting it again on those jet sweeps or an end around, or you're doing something again, what Kyle Shanahan typically does to utilize Deebo Samuel. That's fine.
He's going to seek contact wherever he is. He's not a guy that runs out of bounds. So in a way, I think it's, if you want him running the ball, it doesn't matter if it's on the outside or the inside. He's going to take some damage.
All right, we're going to open up the phone lines at 888-957-9570. We start things out in San Jose. Austin standing by. Austin, what's on your mind, my man?
Hey, what's up, fellas? Happy Saturday, Dan. Listen, and Evan, listen, guys. Dan, it's football, man. I mean, these guys, I'm not saying anything you haven't heard before, but to me, I'm old school, man. You sign these guys, you pay them money, they play football. If they want to run Deebo, War, or less on a given Sunday, that's what his job is. I don't think he's a classic wide receiver. I think he's more of a kind of a tweener guy, right? And I think Shanahan likes to use him for diversion and to mix things up. So I think his role on the 49ers is very unique in terms of other teams. If Deebo went to another team, you might see him in a little different situation. Like I heard he was supposed to go. The rumor was that he was going to go to the Ravens. Can you imagine if the Ravens had Deebo? That's a thought, but. So I'm not into load management. I don't believe in it. If like CMC gave the Lions everything he had last year, he's hurt this year. That's the way it goes, man. I mean, that's every other team in the league deals with it. So you start trying to load manage, and you think you already got it the playoffs locked. I keep hearing Evan and people talk about, it's not important to the playoffs. Well, first of all, you got to get to the playoffs. I mean, there's no guarantee you get to the playoffs. I mean, just because you beat the Jets. And by the way, what vanilla defensive Saleh. Saleh was making sure he can come back to the Niners the way he dialed up that. That was the weakest defensive scheme I've seen in a long time. Put no pressure on Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy had slippers and a bathrobe back there, and he could sit down and relax. He got no pressure. So I don't think Saleh has a long time. I think Saleh's he may not make it through the year based on what I saw. So, guys, I'm enjoying the conversation. Oh, last thing, Dan. I know you haven't talked about Lance yet. But my thoughts about Lance are I think they abuse him. I think Shanahan completely misused Lance. And I don't think the kid's done yet. I think he's got a future. It may be a little rough, but I think Lance will be in the NFL. He'll play someday. That's my thoughts, guys.
I really hope so. I think I tell you this, Ev, that you get to a certain point, a certain age where it's not so much about teams. You pull for good people. And you get to know some of these players. And you're around the locker rooms and Big Chick is hanging out with the 49ers all week. And you just, at the end of the day, you just want people that you like to do well, just like anything else in life. And I want to see Trey Lance because I think Trey Lance comes from good stock. I like his parents. I like his story. And I hope he does well. But in terms of being a quarterback, I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to remind people this, but I will. Because the kahuna is going to go there. When he threw his first pass, I told everybody that, and I wanted to like the guy. I'm like, there's a hitch in this dude's giddy up. And he's not very accurate. I'm holding my breath. And then as it went along, I became this guy on Devone Island saying, I'm sorry, man, I don't see it. And everybody, including that morning crew, my God, they had actual size, life-size posters of the guy that they would kiss in the morning before they came on the air and did their show. It was like, this is the second coming. And I didn't want to be that guy, but I'm like, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be a better chance to win. That's how I became the Jimmy Garoppolo apologist. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a quarterback, but at the time he gave you a better chance to win than Trey Lance. But I had to stand on that island all by myself for years before the realization that Trey Lance was not that guy.
So do you feel vindicated?
Absolutely. And I'm not shallow. I'll admit it.
It is funny to me, though, because you have always loved Sam Darnold. You have not necessarily been as big of a fan as Trey Lance. I mean, when Sam Darnold came into the league, he was 21 years old. Trey Lance came into the league, he's very young as well. What's to say Trey Lance's career is done if Sam Darnold still's got a chance?
Well, the reason is, and I hope I'm wrong, because again, I like the kid, is that, and listen, I'm not JT O'Sullivan. I'm not a quarterback guru.
I think it's just JT.
What's his last name?
No, I'm just kidding.
I think it's O'Sullivan.
Yeah, no, I know.
All right. But when you look at Trey Lance, it's just like, I don't know, switch him to a hybrid linebacker or it's just like quarterback. When he threw the 5 interceptions, it's not by accident. Ask Kyle Shanahan or anybody that saw him practicing with the 49ers. He just was not accurate with the football. And I go back to what Bill Walsh, the genius, the architect of the West Coast offense, what he would always say and preach. He's like, I can teach you a lot of things as a quarterback. Listen to me. I'll get you paid and I'll win you Super Bowls. One thing I cannot teach is accuracy. You either have that in the DNA or you do not. And I think that when it came to Trey Lance, it's just the accuracy, the delivery of a football just looked very awkward and not fluid right from day one. And that's where things sort of begin and end with my assessment of Trey Lance. Sam Darnold, on the other hand, I mean, the dude is the prototypical quarterback. 6'4", you want to vote for the guy. Right out of Southern California, central casting. This guy can make every single throw. It's just a matter of he was with Adam Gase, and then he was with Matt Rule. And it's just one of those guys that just needed to be in the right environment and get the right opportunity. But I think he's smart enough. I think he can make all the throws. It's just he just needs the opportunity, and now he's getting that with Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of quarterbacks you can make the case for it. If they were in the right environment, they could succeed. I don't think Sam Darnold is anything special. I just think he's in a better situation now. So I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold fan. I don't think he necessarily has it between the ears, though he has all the physical talent in the world. And I don't know if you're going to go Coward on me, but I think Colin Coward had Sam Darnold as like, the next coming of Peyton Manning or was it Aaron Rodgers or something like that? God. I mean, just look, Sam Darnold had a very nice week 1 against the hapless New York Giants. And I think this week, against his old flame, speaking of people you shouldn't have got tattoos for, I'm glad Sam Darnold didn't get a 49ers tattoo right above his you-know-what and get a tramp stamp because he's now on his 4th team and he'll probably be on another team in another couple of years. And I think this weekend is not going to be a great day for him. I think he's going to struggle against the Niners because the one part we didn't talk about much in the Jets game, we also haven't mentioned McCaffrey much we can get into on the other side, was also how good this 49ers defense looked. And I think that's a big part of their game plan moving forward as well. With a little bit more consistency and cohesion, this group is going to make Brock Purdy's job a bit easier tomorrow.
Yeah, let's talk about the defense because I really think that was as much of a storyline as anything else. I want to get into Nick Sorensen. By the way, another guy that was part of the cancel culture when it came to quarterbacks, number 1 picks, Jared Goff was another guy. It's like, oh, Jared Goff sucks. That's the end of him. Let's just move on and look at what it is that he's doing out there in Detroit. All right, we continue. Time to talk to the...
By the way, we also have some McCaffrey news we have to get into on the other side.
Yes, we'll talk about McCaffrey and the IR, which seemed to be inevitable if you heard the press conference of what it is that Kyle Shanahan, that's now official. We'll detail that for you. The latest news concerning Christian McCaffrey. Also get into the 49ers on the other side of the ball and talk defense with Evan Giddings and Dan Devone on 95.7 The Game.
From the mind of a 2-foot-tall talking spokes puppet comes this year's biggest challenge. It's time for Bob's Dare to Compare, the hottest game show on TV that asks, what happens when you compare Bob's to the competition? You get style. You get quality. You get beeps and boops and dings and whomps. And thousands of dollars in savings. Everyone's a winner when you dare to compare with Bob's Discount Furniture. Shop in store or at mybobs.com to play now.
I'm Chris Walls, and I'm a truck driver from Missouri. For 13 hours a night, I sit in my truck and I drive. Out of boredom, I'll stop and eat. If I'm not doing fast food, I guarantee there's a bag of chips open on my dashboard. Along with that, I'm good for about 4 liters of soda a night. That was all until Andro 400. I started out 4 months ago weighing 341 pounds, and since taking Andro 400, I have dropped 45 pounds. I'm sleeping better. There's no cravings. My knee pains went away. I've had some lower back issues, and I've noticed that went away, and I can only contribute that to Andro 400. One thing that Andro 400 said on the radio ad says it attacks belly fat. Well, let me tell you, it did. I've lost 6 inches. This product really does work.
So guys, if you'd like to experience similar results, then get Andro 400, the safe, natural, and inexpensive way to boost your testosterone. Go to andro400.com or call 888-400-0435. 888-400-0435.
Get ready to party the lazy way. Right now, Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries is giving you a chance to win a pair of exclusive one-day VIP passes to two of the biggest festivals of the year. Aftershock on October 10th through 13th with rock icons such as Motley Crue, Iron Maiden, Slipknot, and Slayer. Golden Sky Country Music Festival on October 18th through the 20th, featuring country legends like Luke Bryan, Thomas Rhett, and Keith Urban. Find the participating stores at partythelazyway.com. While you're at a Lazy Boy store, trade in your old furniture and score a discount on a brand new Lazy Boy.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-575-6986. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS.
Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start.
Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems.
We have over 1,000 5-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau.
You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com
or call 800-575-6986. That's 800-575-6986.
Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
Plan your dinner at Whole Foods Market. Get no antibiotics ever organic air-chilled boneless skinless chicken breasts for 20% off with Prime through September 17th. Go for spicy stir fry or crispy chicken parm. While supplies last, shop in-store or online. Terms apply.
I'm still going for it, even with higher stroke risk from atrial fibrillation and a regular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Over a 3-year study, Eliquis apixaban tablets reduced stroke risk better than warfarin, and over 97% of Eliquis patients did not experience a stroke. A first stroke occurred in 2.9% of warfarin patients versus 2.3% of Eliquis patients.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without asking your doctor. It may increase your stroke risk. Eliquis can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding, unusual bruising, or tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. Medications such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners may increase bleeding risk. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
Are you curious about who offers the best deals on top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs? The answer is surprising. It's not online, and it's not the warehouse clubs. The best deals on top-rated TVs are at Video Only. Don't believe it? Then check out the trade-in deals at Video Only. How about $500 for your old TV? Try doing that online. Before you buy that new TV, drop into Video Only. If you don't, you'll be sorry.
Now back to 95.7 The Game.
All right, we had what I guess could be deemed breaking news.
Yeah, I think so.
The latest concerning Christian McCaffrey, who has now officially been put on IR. Can you detail things for the fans at home, Sev?
Well, and I do want to bring Carter Chickering into this because he's been down in Santa Clara all week, but pretty much it was asked yesterday to Kyle Shanahan after Christian McCaffrey was not practicing yesterday. Pryor was a limited participant Wednesday and Thursday, and he said there's a possibility of Christian McCaffrey going on IR. He officially was out for Sunday against the Vikings, but then 15 minutes ago, Adam Schefter of ESPN reported that 49ers are officially placing Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve due to his calf tightness and Achilles tendonitis. So he'll now miss the next 4 games at least before the team assesses whether he can return in mid-October. But we were talking during the break with Carter, and it feels like this was, I don't know if you'd label it inevitable, but it seemed like this is the way it was trending. What did you see from McCaffrey this week?
I saw him struggling on Thursday. There's no doubt. I mean, I thought that him just sprinting up and down the field seemed crazy to me when, he clearly was in pain too. He made it quite clear that he was in pain basically on Thursday. And Friday, he was out there still, which I was shocked at, frankly. So I don't know. I think obviously putting him on IR, though, is to me a very good move at this point.
Now, according to Shanahan, it seemed as though there was more optimism last week when it was, I don't know who you believe, but there was a game-time decision. And it looked as though Thursday, Big Chick, you correct me if I'm wrong, that this week it actually got worse. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah.
So it looks as though it's going from bad to worse. And so you talked about this, that if you're the 49ers and you're Kyle Shanahan, that right now you got to prepare as though he's not coming back this year. Now, I don't mean to get that drastic or that theatrical, but it's the next man up in the NFL. And so we were talking about Jordan Mason, and we were talking about Deebo carrying the football, and now Isaac Guerendo. Do the 49ers, and you have Taylor also at number 3 on that depth chart, do they entertain going out and acquiring another running back that has some experience? I know Jeff Wilson's name has been bandied about. But what are we doing when we look at the running back room now going forward without Christian McCaffrey for an extended period of time as he officially goes on IR?
Well, I don't think you need to think about getting a running back yet. But if Christian McCaffrey is not looking like he's going to be ready to return after he's done with the IR, because they have a month now, then I do think that's something they'll address at the deadline. Or we'll also see, all right, to rewind a bit, the moment that they signed Matt Breida during training camp, my eyebrows were raised about McCaffrey and his calf strain, because I don't think that the Niners would go out and bring in extra bodies. Now, they eventually cut Breida, but he might be a candidate to come back. I don't think that they would go out and try and find extra running backs unless there was a possibility that this could become serious. I also think that McCaffrey and his tendonitis, it's something that you can't predict. That's why it was worse this week maybe than it was last week, because from everything we know about the injury, it's completely day to day. And so McCaffrey, to Carter's point, might have been trying to push it Wednesday, Thursday. That might have aggravated it. It also might have just been feeling terrible on Friday when he tried to test it, and that's why he didn't practice, and that's why they're just going to give him time to try and heal this thing, because the only thing, according to Dr. Nirav Pandya, one of our medical experts here at 95.7 The Game, was talking about, is you just need rest. And if the rest is not good enough to get you back to 100%, then I'm not really sure what you can do. And so I don't want to frame it as a ticking time bomb in regards to a season-ending injury for McCaffrey, but I do think that if the Niners are wise, they need to approach the season like he's not coming back this year, either because he is not physically capable of doing so, or because I don't believe he'll be 100% when he comes back. Now, the luxury they do have is obviously Jordan Mason, and the fact that the Niners are a team that, even though to Austin's point earlier, they have to get to the postseason, I feel pretty confident with the roster that they have that they can get to the postseason without Christian McCaffrey. But the overarching question is, can they win a Super Bowl without Christian McCaffrey? And that I have some doubts about. So does it decrease the Niners' chances to get to where they want to go and hoist a trophy? Yes. Does it completely kill their season? I don't believe so, even if he does not return from this Achilles tendonitis.
Well, now front and center becomes Jordan Mason. This is not just a stopgap or an abridge until McCaffrey comes back this week or the following week, but now he becomes the focal point. And when you think about what Jordan Mason was able to do, I think the 49ers will be okay. Now, is he Christian McCaffrey? No. And I think you lose a lot in terms of passing the football and sort of the passing schemes and checking down or getting what it is that on those wheel routes or what it is that McCaffrey was able to provide. And listen, Jordan Mason did catch a pass for a first down last week, but is he the receiver? Is he the football player? No, but this team has so many weapons that you're going to be okay without the likes of Christian McCaffrey. That's sort of the interim outlook. Now that we're talking about Christian McCaffrey potentially out for a month or potentially even longer, we don't know. We just have to let this play out. I can't tell you how good or bad Jordan Mason will be as your workhorse and as your number one a month or 2 months from now. So we're stepping into an area of unknown. I think that the one the one piece of this that might provide some level of security and sort of soften the blow. The news once again coming down this morning, just moments ago. If you're just joining us, Christian McCaffrey has officially been put on IR, which means he has to be out a minimum of some 4 weeks. So he's gone for the next month. But if there is an area of feel good in all of this, it's the play of that offensive line. And it's not necessarily Trent Williams or bust, where, okay, it's 3rd and 2, or we need a yard, or we need a couple of yards. You know where we're going. Everybody knows where we're going. We're running left. The play of Dominic Pooney, I don't know that they've had a rookie. In fact, I want to say that they haven't. I mean, they've drafted 2 offensive linemen in the era of Kyle Shanahan, Aaron Banks and McClinchy, and they're both not bad, but they're okay. And I think that they may have stumbled on a guy in the 3rd round, an 86 overall, on Dom Pooney, who looks like he could be a star at that position. And what does that mean? Well, it means that now that you have a little bit more balance on both sides of the ball, as far as running left and now running right behind Dominic Pooney, as they did on a couple of occasions in Monday night's affair. So you don't want to lose Christian McCaffrey, but the fact that the offensive line looked as good as it did, and again, we're all overreacting because it was just one game, but because of the fact the offensive line looks so effective in week 1, bodes well for whoever is the running back now for the San Francisco 49ers, and it appears as though it's going to be Jordan Mason at least for a while.
I mean, they've always been able to run the ball. It doesn't really matter who the offensive line has been. It frankly hasn't mattered who the running back has been. Kyle Shanahan is just great at creating misdirection in the backfield, and that allows you to pick up 4 to 5 yards to more pretty consistently. But with McCaffrey, I'm not going to lie. If I'm looking ahead, so he's going to miss the first 4 games, or the next 4 games, Minnesota, LA, New England, Arizona. And then the first week he'd be eligible to return would be October 10th. That's a Thursday night game at Seattle. I find it difficult to believe that they'd bring him back on a short week with not much time to practice prior to. So honestly, Dan, optimistically, I'm penciling October 20th, Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's optimistically the first time we would see Christian McCaffrey. And ironically, it's the first game that they had him for when they traded for him a couple of years ago against from the Carolina Panthers. So I think if you're hoping to see McCaffrey soon, the soonest we will see him will be week 7. But in the meantime, at the very least, you have some winnable opponents. I don't think the Niners need McCaffrey to beat the Vikings. I think the Rams are a better team, but they're pretty banged up right now. I don't think they need them to beat the New England Patriots, though they just knocked off the Bengals. I think by week 4, they'll come back down to earth. I don't think they need them to beat the Cardinals, and maybe they don't even need them to beat the Seahawks, but they do need them to beat the Chiefs. They might need McCaffrey to beat the Cowboys. The Niners are eventually going to need Christian McCaffrey, and so that's kind of the panic that I think is coursing through a lot of people's veins at this point. It's not necessarily about what's happening now because they can survive him, but the question of the Niners' ceiling, that's now what needs to be assessed, is what is their ceiling without Christian McCaffrey? And I find it very hard to believe that if they want to accomplish what they could not last year, that his absence does not drastically impact that.
I wouldn't say drastically, and I'm one of those that just firmly believes that, yes, it's a drop-off. But again, Kyle Shanahan has always proven that he can run the football. And his replacement went for 150 yards. What more do you want out of the running back position? Now, obviously, McCaffrey's a better football player, and he gives you, more bells and whistles. There's more things that you can do with him. But to me, this is just me talking, I don't think he's going to be the reason why you don't win that Super Bowl. I think that he's proven, and I'm talking about Kyle Shanahan, the last time he went to a Super Bowl, again, he did it with 3 guys, or the time before, the first time he met Kansas City with Mostert, Breida, and Coleman. And this has been true throughout not only, Kyle Shanahan's tenure, and whether you attribute this to Bobby Turner or his old man, Mike Shanahan, for crying out loud, would turn out 1,000-yard rushers every year. And they were not household names. Yeah, we all know Terrell Davis, but how many of us know Mike Anderson or Orlandis Gary or Clinton Portis? And they were all a product of that system which has now been handed down from Mike Shanahan, Bobby Turner, to that of his son, and that being Kyle Shanahan. So if you want to run the football and you want to burn clock, or as you mentioned, just take away the soul of the opposing team. Well, as they proved on Monday night, you can still do that. Jordan Mason is more than adequate. And yes, I think McCaffrey gives you better opportunity to win. Is he going to be the difference as to why you don't get to an NFC Championship game or win an NFC Championship game or win a Super Bowl? I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think this team is so loaded, has so much talent, and if they are as improved as they were defensively on Monday night, and if that's sustainable throughout the entire season, you can still get to where it is that you want to go.
Yeah, that's true, but Christian McCaffrey was also their best offensive player in the Super Bowl last year. I know he had a fumble, but he had 160 scrimmage yards. Christian McCaffrey is a player that I agree against the Vikings or maybe the Jets or the Patriots. I don't think they necessarily need him. But this Achilles tendonitis to me is not something that is all of a sudden going to go away. I hope it does. I hope miraculously Christian McCaffrey returns to form and is 100%. And by the end of the season, this Niners team is heading up and they are peaking. And we can look at the McCaffrey injury or return as essentially a trade deadline deal. The way that a lot of teams look at, injuries around the deadline is just kind of additions. Again, like you said, gravy. That's the perfect scenario. But if I'm the Niners, I have to also approach the rest of this season like that's not going to be the case. Gravy is gravy. You should not be reliant on a cherry on top of your year. You have to figure out how to move forward without Christian McCaffrey. And I do think that the remainder of this season, the season doesn't fall apart the way that potentially the Miami Dolphins season is going to fall apart, or the way that the Green Bay Packers season might fall apart with Jordan Love getting hurt. That's not the case for the running back position. And I also agree that the Shanahans are kind of directly involved in devaluing the position with how many different guys both his father and now Kyle have been able to use to achieve the heights that they have. But there's no doubt that Christian McCaffrey is one of the best offensive players in football. And I find it hard to believe that even though he plays a replaceable position, that having the best by a mile at that place does not hurt you in the long run if you don't have him.
You're not as good, but I know that this may not be the consensus, and I'm not representing a lot of people. I still think that he's not going to be the reason. If you're good enough to win the Super Bowl, you'll win it because your defense, your offensive line is better. And yes, McCaffrey makes it easier, but you'll still win that Super Bowl. I'd be more concerned if Trent Williams is out. I'd be more concerned if Fred Warner was gone for a month. I think those guys are more impactful in terms of cause and effect of winning football games. Christian McCaffrey in the running back position, we just saw on Monday night that his replacement not only did well, but carved it up for 148 yards.
Well, what if Jordan Mason this week gets 10 carries for 40 yards? Then we might be back to square zero. I also think part of the Jets' game plan did not include Jordan Mason. I don't think they were assuming that this guy was going to turn into Marshall Faulk and just run the ball down. They didn't expect Eric Dickerson on Monday night.
Yeah, but I think a lot of I didn't see Jordan Mason really just be untouched to the second level. Some plays I did. A lot of what he does is just, sort of the stuff that I talked about that I do not want to see Deebo Samuel doing. And that is
yards after contact?
Yards after contact and just putting your nose up and in there. And he's always been that guy, right? He's a guy that always would just plant his foot and go. It's the reason why he beat out Trey Sermon. Remember Sermon, who came out of Ohio State?
I do.
And he was supposed to be that guy. He was drafted ahead of Mason. They both came out the same year. But Bobby Turner's like, you got to go. You need to plant that foot. Stop dancing in the hole. And that's exactly what Mason does. Mason is a guy that just will give you 3 or 4 yards, but it's all grit. And that's what you're looking for out of a running back. And he's not going to have the flash like that of a McCaffrey, but he's going to get the job done. And I would say if he has 10 carries for 40 yards, it's because, that's the offensive. If McCaffrey was toting the rock, what's he going to get at 10 yards and maybe 45 yards or 10 carries and 50 yards? I mean, you're relying on that offensive line and that whole blocking scheme. I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to be the exclusive reason as to why you don't win that Super Bowl. There's going to be other things that are going to rear their head.
Well, sure. I mean, Christian McCaffrey wasn't the reason why they lost the Super Bowl last year, but his fumble certainly didn't help. By the way, last year against the Minnesota Vikings, granted, right, without Trent Williams, McCaffrey had 15 for 45 on the ground. So Williams was not present. However, I do think that Brian Flores is a defensive coordinator that will try and take that away from the Niners, especially coming off of the performance we saw against the Jets. They were perfectly fine. The Shanahan play calling scheme was with just giving the ball to Jordan Mason. And that's all that they needed to do. Brock Purdy had to make a couple of plays, and to his credit, he generally hits all the layups and can also, connect on a few deep balls, 26-yard completion to Kittle, near 40-yard completion to Juszczyk. Like, he's going to hit those. I'm surprised, though, you haven't brought up the quarterback, because to me, that's where my attention immediately turns to. Without McCaffrey, Brock Purdy's job is going to be more difficult, and he's going to have to play better than I think he did last season. Or at least he's going to have to be more, efficient with the ball. I mean, they're going to have to throw it more, I think. And I don't think he's going to have as much of a dynamic running back to rely on, because this is the other part too. When Deebo Samuel was in the backfield running the ball last year, McCaffrey you could put in the slot. You could just flex him out as a wide receiver, and you have to pay attention to him. You can't do that with Jordan Mason. He can run the ball, but he's a physical runner. I think he has a bit more wiggle than people give him credit for, but he's primarily north-south. But the moment that he's off the field, there's less question marks as far as the offense for the Niners than when there was with McCaffrey.
I'm with you that I think that the defense will dictate a lot of this. That Flores is going to recognize that, okay, rookie, or he's not a rookie, but Jordan Mason proved to me that you can beat us. And he'll stack the box. He'll spy him. He'll do whatever it is that he needs to do to sort of take that away from the 49ers. And if that happens, because every game has its own personality, and while they had success running right at the New York Jets, if that's taken away, well, then Brock Purdy may put the ball up some 50 to 55 times in this game. I mean, again, you have to take what it is that the defense is providing you.
Well, that's the other part of it, too, though, is that Purdy, as great as he was last year, as efficient as he was last year, he was not very good when he had to throw it more than 30 times. In fact, I think all of one of their losses came when he threw the ball 30 or more times. Last week, I think he threw it 27 times against the Jets, which was kind of a lot for him. But, I mean, in a perfect world, I think Purdy's sitting at 19 for 25, 280 to 300 yards and a couple scores. So can he do that if he doesn't have McCaffrey on the field? Perhaps. I just think he's going to have to throw the ball more, and that's where sometimes he and the Niners offense can at least have gotten into trouble. But I don't think that impacts them much against the Vikings. Again, I'm more thinking about what this team is going to look like without McCaffrey. And I don't believe that long term, and even over the course of this month, it can operate at an optimal level. Not to say, look, Jordan Mason had a career game, and credit to him. I just find it very difficult to believe that he's going to be able to repeat that performance week after week.
Oh, he's not going to run for 150 yards.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, not even the workload. I'm just saying the efficiency of his runs. I don't see it happening repeatedly once defenses understand what the Niners have to do or what they can do with him, because he's a little bit more one-dimensional. He is more one-dimensional than McCaffrey.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Carter.
Can I offer a glass half full kind of aspect of this whole thing? Is Christian McCaffrey's been injured. He's had injury issues throughout his career, and through his Niner tenure, he has had basically no injury issues. This was bound to come at some point, right? If it was going to come, could it have come at a better time than this? I mean, yeah, they have 3 divisional games, but I mean, for the most part, beside the Rams, this is a really easy stretch for the Niners, right? And if you're going to get your guy healthy, right, and get this, look, this is clearly something that could lead to a much bigger injury if it's not really just like, let's get it out of the way kind of thing. And if it's going to happen at some point, is there a better time for it to happen than now?
No, you're probably right. And to do it in the beginning of the season.
Well, yes, unless it's something that lingers for the entire year.
Well, that's the concern.
Then, yeah.
Because
I'm not worried about these next 4 weeks. I mean, they play bottom feeders. I'm not worried about the Vikings tomorrow. even if the Niners somehow lose that game, I think they'll still be okay over the course of the next 4 weeks. But my biggest concern is that we don't see 23 again. And if we do, he looks like he did, according to Carter on Thursday, where he's grimacing every time he runs the ball.
Well, he won't play if that's the case. But I think the larger issue is the injury. And I think the location of that injury. Like anything that starts or is near the Achilles, yikes. Remember Kevin Durant? I always go back and, that loss to Toronto where, first it was a calf injury and then lo and behold, less than 10 days later, he snaps his Achilles. And I think everybody's aware of that. That's why Giannis didn't play and they shut him down towards the end of last year. He had a calf injury. It wasn't about the calf. They're like, that Achilles, bro, we can't have that thing snap and have you out for the next 2 years. And I think that's sort of where the 49ers are at. It's an Achilles. It's just like we have to err on the side of caution. The fact, Big Chick, that he was actually out on the field and running, I would bubble wrap this guy until that thing is at 100%, trying to squeeze him into Sunday's game.
Once he's on the field, you can't bubble wrap him.
Well, that's just it. But in order to get on the field, you have to make sure that thing's 100%.
Look, he said last week that if it was a playoff game, he would have played. And while I take his word for that, I don't know. Achilles never popped up last year when they were talking about his calf strain, which I think he had or suffered, week 17?
He said this is entirely different. It has nothing to do with last year.
Well, no. I think it's on a different calf, but exactly, it's a different injury.
Yeah.
Playing through a calf strain is, I believe, different than playing through an Achilles strain. And I think they tried to disguise it as a calf strain when it first happened, but now we know it's tendonitis, and tendonitis is not something you can control. You can't just. I was reading an article in The Athletic from Matt Barrows, and there are certain things you can do to help it. There's platelet enrichment. You can give him shots. There's obviously painkillers. There's drugs you can take, but there's no magic potion that's going to make your Achilles that's already strained all of a sudden just heal itself. There's no Wolverine coming around the block.
Time, right? That's the only way this thing is going to heal, is that you don't have contact and you're not putting pressure on it.
But a month, I don't know. Look,
is that enough time? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's why I would say optimistically, if we are looking at this from a glass half full perspective, I think week 7 is the soonest that we possibly see McCaffrey. That's against the Kansas City Chiefs.
All right, we continue here on 95.7 The Game. Your thoughts? Christian McCaffrey out for the next month. He's officially on IR. That word coming down just moments ago. Do the 49ers have enough with Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerrero, the rookie out of Louisville? Want to get your calls, your thoughts, 888-957-9570. Evan Giddings, Big Chick, Devone here on 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the warehouse club.
But?
It was video only. They had better deals on the Samsung, LG, and the Sony TVs that got the highest scores.
Better than online and at the club?
I know. Video only beat them all. And now we can afford an even better model for the same price. My research really paid off.
If we buy it video only.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll be sorry.
At Video Only, you won't find huge stores with refrigerators or microwaves, but you will find the best deals on top-rated TVs, soundbars, and monitors. Shop around. Just make sure you visit Video Only, because if you don't,
you'll be sorry.
In Mountain View, San Mateo, Union City, Dublin, and San Rafael. Video Only.
Do you have a car or truck sitting in your driveway that doesn't run? It costs too much to fix, and you don't want to pay to have it towed. QuickAuction.com is here to help. At QuickAuction.com, we have buyers ready to give you an offer on your car now, and they'll pick it up where it sits. Plus, it's absolutely free to use.
true stars in the NFL. And we're discussing, we want to hear from you, 888-957-9570, as just what sort of impact this will have on the 49ers going forward. Now, we all know what it is that Jordan Mason was able to do on Monday night against the New York Jets when he stepped up with some 28 carries and 148 yards. Is that sustainable? Are you comfortable with Jordan Mason, along with the kid Isaac Guerendo, getting a load of the carries as well? Or do you like what is something that I think is very alarming, and that being Deebo Samuel being lined up as the lone setback and also getting carries right up in the middle of that line between the tackles, some 8 carries for Deebo Samuel. But your thoughts on the loss, now the official loss of one Christian McCaffrey for the next month as he goes on IR, as the 49ers now try and deal with the loss of one of the key and one of the premier players in the NFL, and the security around one Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo, Taylor, who's number 3 on the depth chart, or do they go out and get another running back again? Jeff Wilson Jr. is somebody that knows the system. We know how Kyle Shanahan enjoys players that are familiar with his system, and Wilson is out there. Could he be somebody that they bring on board, or do they just stay in-house with what it is that they have?
Well, they're going to need some more depth. I mean, they're going to eventually need to sign another back, probably just to have an extra body on the roster, because not just because of McCaffrey, it just is a position where guys get worn down and get hurt a lot. Jordan Mason could get hurt tomorrow. So you need depth, but I don't know. Like, what was your first reaction when you heard Christian McCaffrey, IR, 4 games out? What did that make you think about, Dan?
Well, first of all, it wasn't a shock, because I think that when you're talking about the calf, as I alluded to, that there's a good chance that he wasn't going to play. And after, of course, hearing from Kyle Shanahan, it almost seemed like an inevitability. If you're asking me my initial thoughts, is that are you asking me?
Well, I'm just wondering what rattled around your brain, because for me, the first thing I thought of, honestly, was this is why teams are reluctant to pay running backs. This is why the running back market is suppressed. And it's not something you can predict. It's not something you can game plan for or expect. But unfortunately, that's the reality of the position in 2024, is guys get hurt when they get to a certain age or after they have a certain amount of usage. And Christian McCaffrey led the league in touches last year. The last time he led the league in touches, he was hurt. And it's not always a season-ending injury, and I hope this one isn't, but they're injuries that linger. McCaffrey, the year after, when he played 3 games, I think was an ankle injury that kept him off the field for most of the season. Najee Harris is some guy, is a younger player, but he's gotten a lot of carries. Look, I'm just looking up and down at the running backs that have led the league in rushes and the years after. So after their body has taken a beating. McCaffrey was last season. This year, he's now dealing with a calf strain / Achilles tendonitis. In 2022, it was Josh Jacobs that had nearly 400 touches for the Raiders. The next year, he only played 13 games. He dealt with injuries. You go back to 2020, Derrick Henry, who has been kind of a poster child for consistency, but the year he had nearly 400 touches, he tore his ACL the next season. Ezekiel Elliott, after 2018, was a guy that has been on the decline since then. Le'Veon Bell in 2017, 400-plus touches. That was one of his last elite years. DeMarco Murray's best Pro Bowl season, his last Pro Bowl season, was at age 28. LaShawn McCoy, age 29. It's just the reality of the position. When you get to a certain age, you fall off, and at a lot of time, it's because of injuries that you can't account for. I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey's career is done, but there's a possibility that we have seen the best of Christian McCaffrey, and it unfortunately comes in a year where the Niners are expecting to compete for a Super Bowl. So that was the first thing that went through my mind, is that McCaffrey was paid this summer, and appropriately so, as the best running back in the league and the highest paid at his position. But right now, what we're talking about, him going on IR, is the exact reason why teams do not want to pay running backs top flight money, because they eventually wear down. And Christian McCaffrey might be reaching that point in his career.
Well, it's certainly something to think about, although the timing is pretty bad. I mean, if you're going to re-up the guy over the offseason for the 4 years and the $64 million, you're thinking about that this guy is still in his prime somewhat. And it's somebody that you're going to rely on not only this year because he's still in his late 20s. But yeah, there's a lot of, they're disposable. Well, let's just, let's call it what it is. Which is why I think that, the way the 49ers got there in 2019 and using that three-headed monster of Breida, Mostert, and Coleman might be the way to go. And if we learn anything from this is that maybe it's not exclusively just giving the ball 28 times to one guy, but sharing that load back there. And if Jordan Mason continues to prove to people that this wasn't just an outlier in one game performance, but he's a legitimate back, that you're going to reduce the minutes or the usage of Christian McCaffrey regardless going forward. I think they always say that running backs only have so many carries in them. And you're beginning to see this. But I would say just theoretically, Ev, again, we're overreacting after week one, but as I mentioned, there's only two quarterbacks that threw for over 300 yards. Are we beginning to see, because you know how things are cyclical in sports, especially in the NFL?
Yeah.
For the last decade, it's always been quarterback-centric. Spread it out, let's throw. It's almost like a flag football league, right? It's just, we're going to get shotgun, and we're throwing 80% of the time, which has sort of led to sort of the devaluing of running backs these days. You have to have a good quarterback in order to win. Are we seeing maybe a shift away from that when you look with, of course, Harbaugh coming into the league, and you know what Harbaugh is going to do, and he did it last week against the Raiders in his debut as the head coach of the Chargers. The 49ers going 28 carries and the 148 yards for one Jordan Mason. Are we going to see potentially where the running back controlling the clock and, as you talked about, establishing control of a football game by running right the hell at him sort of attitude, coming back into the game of football, where it's not necessarily let's throw it every other down, get into a shotgun, but rather let's just get under center and just eat some clock, control the momentum, and dictate the pace of this game and bring back the running game?
Well, I do think it was interesting we saw someone like Joe Mixon, who's on a new team. I think he had a league-high 30 rushes last week for the Houston Texans. James Cook last week had 19 carries, and then a short week was also used like a bell cow. Najee Harris had 20 carries. I think Barkley had close to 30 touches between rushes and catches. I think it indicates, a lack of preparation from the quarterbacks because they don't play a lot in preseason. I think they're a bit rusty. I also think it's about teams trying to ease into the season, and you're able to keep controlling the ball and execute what you want when you're just turning around and handing the ball off. But in regards to the Niners, I do think that Brandon Aiyuk not having a full training camp might have impacted how much they were able to throw the ball. Clearly, McCaffrey not being there meant that they had to use Deebo, or chose to use Deebo more as a running back than as a wide receiver. And George Kittle was not all that active in the passing game. I think the quarterbacks are a bit behind at this point in the season, but I don't think it necessarily means that all of a sudden running backs are back. I just think it means that week one, or maybe even the first few weeks of the season, teams are going to be more prone to put the ball on the ground and trying to establish the running game. But it isn't as if the individual running back is all of a sudden more valuable. Like, I think running the football might have corrected itself, in the market, but throwing the ball 55 times never helped anybody anyways. Like, every guy that is considered a top flight quarterback or an elite passer has some semblance of a running game. Now, you're game planning for the quarterback, but Patrick Mahomes has Isaiah Pacheco. Joe Burrow, prior to this season, had Joe Mixon. Josh Allen has, in fact, the only weapon that didn't take away from his offense was the running back. Jalen Hurts, they went out and got him Saquon Barkley. Like, running backs are valuable, but you can never account for them being there consistently year in and year out. That's why someone like who we see this weekend in Justin Jefferson was made the highest paid non-quarterback, is because up until last year, he hadn't had an injury, he said, outside of his sophomore year in high school. It's just easier for wideouts to stay on the field. So that's why they're getting paid. It's not just about what they can do in an individual season, but availability is the best ability. Well, and it's also that you don't necessarily need, because it was, back when I was growing up, it was always, the first 10 guys taken out of an NFL draft, upwards to 4 or 5 of them were running backs.
because it was a running back. It was a running sort of dominated league. Like back in the day, it was all about the Billy Sims of the world. It's not about a quarterback, but do you have what is considered a top-tier running back? And that obviously is not the case. I mean, look at Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason isn't the outlier, but he was undrafted. And you see a lot of that in the NFL. Your man who's with the Chargers, Eckler, another undrafted free agent.
I think he's in Washington now, but yeah.
He's in Washington, but a guy that, you see a lot of that in the NFL. You know, when you talk about the status of running backs right now, we think about Saquon Barkley and the contract dispute he had with the New York Giants, and of course he wanted to get paid. Well, he got paid in Philadelphia, and I think we'd all agree it's Christian McCaffrey, maybe Saquon Barkley, 1-2 as far as running backs in the NFL. You know how much he's making this year?
Saquon?
$12 million. $12 million, and he's top paid. And yeah, that's certainly, relatively speaking, that's a good salary. But when you think about what the wide receivers are making, where everybody's sort of north of 30, that's sort of in that same, boat or regarded in terms of being at the top of their position in the NFL. And the guy's making 12 mil, which just sort of accentuates your point that it's not highly valued on football teams.
Well, you just can't afford to pay them because you don't know if they're going to be there the next year. It is valuable to have an elite running back. We saw that the last 2 seasons with McCaffrey. There's no doubt he makes everyone's life a lot easier. But the cost of the wear and tear at that position means that you might run into a situation like this season where he's unavailable. And that's difficult to overcome if you are a Super Bowl contender. The reliance on that position, to me, is just... I don't think Kyle Shanahan is relying on Christian McCaffrey. We clearly saw it last week, and we've seen him churn out running backs left and right. But my biggest question is someone like Brock Purdy reliant on Christian McCaffrey long term. He wasn't last week, and I think that that'll be the next progression he makes as a quarterback. But he's always had Christian McCaffrey. Since the moment that he has started as the Niners quarterback, he has had number 23 in the backfield. And they have been one of, if not the best offenses efficiency-wise in the league. How does not having his running back that he's only known impact what he does as a quarterback?
Well, I think it's Brock Purdy throwing the football to Christian McCaffrey is what I think is going to be what's missed most by that of the Niners. Because, again, they've proven, the NFL has proven, but certainly the Shanahans, that it doesn't matter. Our zone blocking, whatever the hell you want to call it, we will get you to the second level. You will get yards running the football under Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, or Bobby Turner, whoever the hell it is. You will be successful at running the football. The difference with Christian McCaffrey is his ability to get out in the flats, for him to get in that route tree. And I think he'll be missed. The area that I think that Brock Purdy will miss him the most is throwing to him. That's the one thing.
I agree.
The addition that he provides and what separates him from all other running backs. As far as running the ball, yeah, Christian McCaffrey's better than Jordan Mason, no doubt. But is the drop-off that vast? No. I said that last week. You'll be okay. And again, because the running back position, it is what it is right now, is why I think you can still, if your goal is to win a Super Bowl, then Christian McCaffrey isn't the deal breaker. The running back position is, as we've talked about, does not decide whether or not you're going to be a good team offensively, especially when it comes to the 49ers. Not to take anything away from the talent of the young man, but again, the position has been proven that you can get undrafted guys who sometimes are just as good and not miss a beat. The one area of concern is going to be throwing the football. But again, I think you can offset that by throwing more, maybe now to Kittle, or maybe Deebo has a bigger role, and Brandon Aiyuk's got to step up. Maybe Jawan Jennings, who is also, speaking of not being available and being hurt, but Jawan Jennings, and you're going to get Ricky Pearsall back at some point. Now maybe they have bigger roles because McCaffrey's out. But I'm okay with Jordan Mason, and I don't think a running back in 2024 is going to decide whether or not you ultimately win that Super Bowl, if that is the end game for the 49ers this year.
No, I don't think so. But then again, it's Christian McCaffrey is a whole hell of a lot more important to his offense than other running backs are to theirs. And I think it is because of what you're talking about. It's because he's the ultimate safety blanket. He can run the ball 30 times if you need. He can also catch 100 passes in a season if you need. He can also, on third down, be used in pass protection. He's somebody that can be on the field at all times and do everything. He's a perfect running back. The thing that gives me some optimism is that the Niners, as opposed to other teams, are more equipped to replace not the player individually, but the production of the player. And that's because they have, honestly, number one, they have Deebo Samuel, who does a lot of similar things that Christian McCaffrey can do as far as catching out of the backfield, running like a running back. I just wonder if at this point in the season, asking Deebo to play that way for 16 straight weeks, if that is something that is wise long-term for him this season. Because Deebo is already, he's not, I wouldn't label him as injury prone, but he gets nicked up. He's going to miss a few games. It's just going to happen. But is that process expedited by the fact that he's got to make up for where McCaffrey now isn't?
Oh.
And he's on the sidelines. And that's football. Next man up. Deebo's going to get the rock, and Deebo's going to he's going to have a lot more on his shoulders this season. And hopefully he turns back the clock and they get 2021 Deebo, who's a first-team All-Pro, 1,700 scrimmage yards, 16 touchdowns, a lot of them on the ground, all the rest. But if you're trying to keep your team at peak health heading into the postseason, I'm not even talking about McCaffrey, but just the rest of your team, I mean, I think there's a big trickle-down effect.
Listen, Deebo can get the ball more now that McCaffrey's out, but hopefully not as the lone setback going A-gap off the guard. That, to me, is a recipe for disaster, especially guys you talked about that plays to contact, but also, as a result, often gets injured. All right, let's get out to the phone lines, 888-957-9570. Let's kick things off in San Mateo and say hello to Steel Toe. Steel, what's up, man?
Thanks, fellas. Thank you for taking my call. Yeah, I think I'm one of the rare fans that is looking at Christian McCaffrey's injury, where I think I'm willing to sacrifice this year and let him rest the whole year because we gave him his extension on his contract. And in order to get that your money's worth for that extension, I'm willing to sacrifice this year to get Christian McCaffrey 100% for next year and get the McCaffrey that we all know and love. And I don't want him to try to get into this year and maybe let this injury linger for the rest of his career. I didn't really like how the Warriors kind of did that to Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant gave us 2 championships, and they didn't even give him that 1 year to rest to possibly bring him back to 100%. So I don't want the 49ers to do that to Christian McCaffrey. I still believe there's a chance to bring back Christian McCaffrey at 100% and keep this window of Super Bowl opportunity alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Steele. And I got to tell you, here at 95.7 The Game in the studios, I got Big Chick who's laughing at you.
Hey,
I got Evans laughing at you.
Hey, Steel Toe, I'm on an island here, all right? They're trying to roast you. I appreciate the call.
Let me just tell you something.
Well,
Big Chick is laughing. I got to tell you, Big Chick, I'm down with Steele.
Oh, my God.
You lose a lot of the team next year. I mean, you lose the entire secondary next year. This is the window. The window is closing, and that's just a fact.
Well, I think it's more simple than that. It's if you're able to play, you play.
Well, he's obviously not, but I think the point Steele is trying to make is that you just re-upped him. You just reset the running back market with his contract, that this is a long-term play. That he's still in his late 20s, that you have to look, if this thing lingers, you have to look beyond next year when it comes to Christian McCaffrey. You cannot force him back on the field, have him snap that Achilles and he's out for 2 years and the career is in jeopardy. Like you just, financially, you're beholden to this guy and that contract. Now, it's not all guarantees. I don't know the inner workings of the deal, but it's a long-term play when it comes to Christian McCaffrey, and especially when it gets to the Achilles. And he's right, Kevin Durant was misdiagnosed, quite frankly. He had a calf injury, and then the Warriors said, okay, well, you're fine. Get back out there. Boom. Less than 2 weeks later, he snaps the Achilles, and that's the end of their run in terms of beating Toronto and trying to win that NBA championship.
But I'm glad he brought that up because similar to McCaffrey, like we heard him say last week that if it was a playoff game, he would have played. I think the same thing could be said about Durant. The fact that it was the championship is why he played. If that was a regular season game or stretch, KD wouldn't have played with that calf strain, but it was the championship. It was the finals. That's why he played, and he risked injury, and he got hurt. Christian McCaffrey, I hate to break it to people, but if he can drug up that Achilles by the end of this season and get ready for he gonna play. Because to Carter's point, and it's not just about like this year or the window, if you have a chance to win a Super Bowl, you do everything possible to win a Super Bowl. And the Niners, unfortunately, have gotten very close recently, and they have not won it. But I do not think you can look beyond this season if McCaffrey can get back out there. If he's not 100% and this Achilles lingers, which I think is a possibility, well, then, yes, you hold him out because he can't help you when he's on the field if he's hurt. But if he is able to go, he will play this year because the Niners, I do think, need him if they're going to reach their optimal offensive level.
Let's get out to Larry hanging out in San Francisco. It's on your mind, man.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? This is the way I look at it, man. You know what? We really need him in the playoffs, man. You know, you put him on short-term on the IR. If he comes back, he's still not 100%. Just keep holding him out. You know, just keep holding him out until he's ready to go, you know, because really in the playoffs, if he blows his Achilles tendon in the playoffs, then he blows it in the playoffs. You know what I mean? But if he's healthy and ready to go, I mean, in the playoffs, that's a bonus, man, to us. You know what I mean? And still, there's no chance. I mean, there's no certainty that he won't, as soon as he starts playing when we think he's set, that he won't re-blow it. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you, Larry. It's an area that you, and especially when you step onto the field, you can't simulate this stuff in practice. That you have no idea where that tendon's at. You know it's weak, and if it snaps, it snaps. I'm with you. You just got to give this thing time. That's the only thing that can heal this thing. It's going to be time. If he's out for the next 5 months and comes back in January, would you be okay with that, Ev?
Yeah, if you get him on the field and he can play, yes. And, look, I also hate to
drug him up, according to you?
What do you think football players do every Sunday, Dan? I mean, they don't just sit there
I think that
drink Capri Suns before the game.
If he comes back sooner rather than later, and he snaps that Achilles and is out, and his career is we already talked about how tenuous the position is. But for a running back who's approaching 30 and he tears his Achilles, you're talking about, that could be the end of the guy. I don't know. There might be blood on the hands of the 49ers instead of waiting or erring on the side of let's just give this a little bit more time.
Well, my last thing before we hit the break, the blood is on the position. I mean, if we're being honest, the reason why you can't look ahead and try and preserve McCaffrey for the future, I hate to break it to you, history position says he doesn't have much time left. He's 28 years old. He's going to be 29. Running backs' careers die at the age of 28. That's what happens in the NFL. Some have been able to prolong it for a little bit. Adrian Peterson, I think, had an all-pro, so he rushed for 2,000 yards after an ACL tear at age 30. That's not something that I'm going to rely on happening to Christian McCaffrey.
Frank Gore.
But Frank Gore, I guarantee you, after the age of 30, was not the same back. He played for a long time, but he extended his career by being a backup, by bouncing around. He was not the same rusher he was in his 20s, and that's just the reality of the position. So the other reason why I'm trying to get McCaffrey back out on the field, because he probably doesn't have many elite carries left, if any at all, after suffering this injury.
All right, we continue here on 95.7 The Game. Your thoughts, the breaking news coming down earlier today that Christian McCaffrey officially on IR, which means he'll be unavailable to the San Francisco 49ers for the foreseeable future for the next 4 games. Where do the Niners go from here? How significant is it a loss for San Francisco? And we'll also want to get into the defense, but we'll continue to talk about Christian McCaffrey. Evan Giddings, Big Chick, Dan Devone, 95.7 The Game rolls along after this.
Did you know that most people wait 6 or 7 years before they buy a new TV? That's a lot of time in front of one TV. So why not get one of the best sets for the next 7 years? Like one.
and up, and that next man happens to be one Jordan Mason. We've been kicking it around. Evan Giddings, Devone, big chick behind the glass as we continue to talk about the Niners and where do they go from here without one of their biggest stars in CMC. Let's just get out to New Jersey and hear from our man, Mitch. It's been a while. Mitch, what's on your mind?
How you guys doing? Long time. Hope everything's well.
What's up?
Yes, sir.
I think you have enough offensive talent on this team to carry on, but he's not going to be 100%. Maybe cleared to play, but just like Tua, I'd be holding my breath next time he carries the ball, and it'll be out longer. I don't want to see him give up any assets. I mean, maybe we can go call Miami, get back the 2X49ers there. I guess you have to give a 6th-round pick. One more guy, and I'll leave you guys alone. Chris Rodriguez on the practice squad, I think with the Washington team. Can you get them? Are you allowed to pick, or you have to give up something for him?
Thanks, Mitch. I have no idea who the hell Chris Rodriguez is.
Well, look, okay, all right, did Cody Schrader get cut, Carter?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so that was the guy that I felt like was getting the majority of the preseason snaps at running back. It's funny he didn't make the roster.
Well, he didn't clear waivers.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying they chose not to keep him on the.
I think if he had cleared,
man.
they would have brought him back. But he would
have been on the practice squad.
Yeah.
Well, it was the same reason why. Was it Jarrett Kingston, their 6th-round pick? I think also got claimed off waivers. He didn't make the practice squad either because he got picked up.
The Schrader's with the Rams.
Yeah. But by the way, okay, this is an aside. Not that they would have kept one or both of these players but the fact that they had to make a choice about Brandon Aiyuk and keeping a roster spot, I think that is also why they might have been a little bit pissed at him prior to the season, because he was taking up a roster spot that might have ended up costing them, I don't know, Cody Schrader or somebody. I'm not saying it's that specific guy, but it could be part of it. Again, we're talking about trickle-down effects today, Dan.
All gets back to Brandon Aiyuk, and I'm with the Manning brothers on the couch. Sign that contract and play, young fella. I want to hear about it. Get into camp and catch the damn ball.
All right, first of all, Peyton, or Devone, whoever I'm speaking to right now, you got to, well, I shouldn't speak. I have a big forehead too, but my head isn't as big as Peyton Manning's overall.
Really? You want to go there? Wow.
Well, I'm just saying, he's got a cranium. I mean, you've seen that thing.
He's not as good of a quarterback.
He's not as big as Bochy's, but it's pretty big.
That's stupid. Don't say that again.
Look, get off of Aiyuk, okay? If he's not where he should be in a couple weeks, then we'll chat. But not being there week 1 in a game that they absolutely ran away with, to me, was not as big of a deal. Now, if you don't have McCaffrey for an extended period of time, they will need Aiyuk to be the all-pro receiver, because it looks like Deebo Samuel's going to be in the backfield RB1.
That's not right.
Or RB2.
I think it's not Brandon Aiyuk. It's really sort of an indictment on the whole situation, including the 49ers.
You looking at the front office a little bit differently now? The fact that first guy they paid this summer is the dude who's not on the field?
Yeah, it wasn't very smart.
Gave McCaffrey a guaranteed dollars.
And let's just see how good. Listen, you can sign those contracts for $30 per in the deal that Brandon Aiyuk got, but along with that comes pressure. And so we'll give you the mulligan in week 1, right? We'll say, okay, your timing's off, but bro, $30 million is $30 million a year. You better hang on to the football and you better produce like it is that you did a year ago. So the pressures are squarely on him. Be that number 1. That's what we paid you for.
Well, it's not his fault, but Christian McCaffrey's not even on the field. I'm just saying, like, if there's an expectation for Aiyuk to produce, at the very least, he's getting snaps. McCaffrey just got 2 years of guaranteed money. The first thing that happens to him, he can't control, but his Achilles goes.
Yeah, I would have to think
starts.
That would be certainly in the discussion when the 49ers were.
Yeah, just give him the 19.
But they had to have known, like, to Big Chick's point, when he came to San Francisco, he had a history of getting hurt frequently with Carolina. He was like the biggest tease. Like, he was so good with the Panthers, but he would miss so much time because of those injuries. But thankfully, that hasn't been the case here in San Francisco. And sure enough, he gets the new deal and whap. It's almost eerily similar in a completely different vein, like that of Tua Tagovailoa. Remember Tua? Well, I mean, Tua has the 3 concussions, And then
we know of.
Then he goes through 2023 and he's injury-free or he's concussion-free, and the Dolphins extend him to this contract, which now really becomes sort of a sticking point. But it's almost as though you have this short memory. Same thing with McCaffrey. Oh, he's been healthy with the 49ers. Let's extend him. Forgetting the fact that he plays the running back position and there's a lot of wear and tear on those tires, and that, one way to look at this is that injury is looming.
Yeah.
So
it is. I mean, look, McCaffrey's the best at his position when he's healthy. But to your point, throughout his career, he's had now 3 seasons that have been severely impacted by injuries. So, it sucks. And I personally hate it because I love watching Christian McCaffrey play. He's unbelievable at what he does. But I don't know. It does make me rethink the hesitancy that the Niners did or didn't have this summer in regards to signing him, because apparently that was the easiest decision to make because it got done so quickly, whereas Trent and Aiyuk, who play positions in which injuries do not happen as frequently, were the ones that took the longest. It was the biggest dollars, but at the same time, you're not getting anything for your $19 million right now.
True.
I mean, you're getting something for your, I don't know how much Jordan Mason makes, but it's not that much money.
Oh, God. You talk about...
Here you go, JP.
He may be... I didn't think this would even be possible, but in that backfield, we thought the best deal in the world is Brock Purdy. It might now be Jordan Mason if he becomes that guy, if he becomes running back 1 on a good football team. What's he pulling down, Big Chick? Can you look that up?
Probably like $800K.
I say it's less than that.
I mean, yeah, if that...
He went undrafted, man.
Which, by the way...
He's getting free meal on a 12-pack.
Well, he's always been buried behind great backs, I think. If I remember correctly, Jordan Mason in college... That's
right, by the way, 856.
All right, so... sorry about that. That was rude. No, but Jordan Mason went to Georgia Tech where he was buried behind a 3-year starter, I think, and then his senior season, he didn't beat out this freshman who ended up transferring to Georgia. His name was Jahmyr Gibbs. So he's always been stuck behind like these great running backs. And now that he's finally got his opportunity, he's probably like, dude, I want 40 carries a game. Like, I haven't had a chance to run the football for what feels like years since high school. And the last 2 years, he's had 43 and 40 carries. And he's gonna eclipse that by the end of tomorrow, I think.
Well, I think in all seriousness, I know that they're going to look. You need some depth at the position, and whether it's Jeff Wilson Jr., whether it's somebody with the Miami Dolphins that that's familiar with what it is that the 49ers do in terms of running the ball. I think Isaac Guerendo is a guy that you drafted. He's somebody that got hurt with that hamstring, but then played a lot of football in the preseason and looked good. He's pulling down. He's getting a paycheck from San Francisco. Go ahead and give him the ball. I mean, he's not going to be the number 1. That's Jordan Mason, but I think he now has to move up in the rotation. This idea of bubble wrapping him because he's a rookie doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that from what I saw, Isaac Guerendo was another guy, just a big fella with remarkable speed. I mean, isn't he like I want to say he's like a 4.40 guy? I mean,
Guerendo? Yeah. Oh, by the way, also, sorry, Gibbs was Alabama, not Georgia. He went to Georgia Tech. So the thing about it is, like, yeah, I don't mind using up Mason. You don't mind using up Guerendo, so to speak. It might sound a little harsh.
Exactly what you're doing. No, I know. It's not harsh at all. It's exactly the reality.
But it doesn't sound harsh when there's not much capital invested in the player, and that's why I think the running back position is not as valuable as it once was, because the shelf life is not as long. That's why teams don't give up picks generally for a player like McCaffrey. Now, those players don't become available that often, but Jordan Mason was undrafted. Guerendo was one of the first running backs taken. I don't know if he was the first. He was one of them. He was a 4th-round pick. So you can find, Isaiah Pacheco, again, for example, is a 7th-round selection by the Kansas City Chiefs. The last first-round running back to be a focal part of a Super Bowl? Off the top of my head, Marshawn Lynch? I mean, the Seattle teams in the early 2010s, I mean, we did this exercise yesterday during the midday show, Dan, and it was like, I mean, the running back that has the most postseason success is probably the Garrett Blount by virtue of playing for the Patriots.
Go
and
Ducks.
then he was on that Eagles team that beat the Patriots. But yeah, LeGarrette Blount. LeGarrette Sucker Punch is I think what a lot of people call him. but to my point, it's not like you're not looking at the Ezekiel Elliott's, who is a first-round pick, Derrick Henry, who is up there, Christian McCaffrey. Those players typically aren't on Super Bowl winning teams. In fact, the fact that Christian McCaffrey was the leader and, according to MVP ranking, was the most important offensive player in the Niners last season, the fact that he was the driving force to a team that made the Super Bowl in itself is a rarity in the modern game.
We've seen so much success with undrafted running backs in the NFL that we know that you can find people at that position. That combined with the fact, again, Jordan Mason undrafted coming out of Georgia Tech, that combined with the innovative scheme, that zone scheme that is the 49ers, and the way they run the football. I think it's not anybody, but it's darn close to it that you could plug in back there, and they're going to have success. Now, are they going to be as good as Christian McCaffrey? No. But again, there isn't going to be suddenly this vast drop-off where we want to run the football, but we can't because Christian McCaffrey isn't here. That's not going to be the scenario going forward with San Francisco. And it's not going to be, in my estimation, the reason as to why or why not you don't win a Super Bowl or whatever it is the final goal is going to be. Christian McCaffrey is good, but I think that Trent Williams, Fred Warner are more valuable on this football team. And so Jordan Mason just carved up the Jets for nearly 150 yards. You can win with Jordan Mason. You won't be as good, but you can still win. And you can win consistently without the likes of Christian McCaffrey.
I just think offensively there's less room for error. McCaffrey is a player that turns nothing plays into something, and they have one less of those guys. I also think it puts more pressure on their defense to play like they did last week against the Jets. And, I don't know if the Jets offensively, I think they'll eventually be a better offense, but considering Rodgers hadn't played in 610 days or whatever, or hadn't, played a full game in 610 days. That wasn't an offense that I expected all of a sudden just blow the doors off. The Vikings, you can make a case, are further ahead, with Sam Darnold at the very least having a full preseason to get acclimated, but they're missing their number 2 wide receiver. Aaron Jones is a guy that's given the Niners some hell in the past, but how's he going to run behind a brand new offensive line? Look decent week 1. There are more questions, I think, maybe about the Vikings offense, but the Niners, this group defensively looks much more buttoned up than last year.
Yeah, I would agree.
To me, it is as much about McCaffrey being gone and trying to figure out how you're going to replace him as it just makes everyone's life more difficult than it needs to be. And fortunately, the Niners are a team as talented as they are. Even without McCaffrey, you could make the argument they're still the most talented team in football, which is saying something. But putting McCaffrey in that group just gets you far beyond the top. And it's honestly what made last year so disappointing because that team was just stacked.
They were stacked. And just to talk about defense for a second before we get out of here, something was just a miss defensively because you looked at them, and again, when you looked at the talent in the roster with Fred Warner and Drake Greenwald was healthy, and you did Charvarius Ward. I think I gave you this statistically. Next to McDuffie and Sauce Gardner is like the 3rd best corner in the NFL. Diamador Lenore has emerged as a premier. I mean, they're so good, and you're like, well, why are you getting carved up on the ground? There was always something like, what's going on? Defensively was sort of a head scratch last year. And I hate, because he's already been scapegoated enough, but I really do think it gets down to Steve Wilkes, that there was just something wrong schematically with him and the way the 49ers have played defense historically, at least under the reign of Kyle Shanahan. And I think they got back to that with Nick Sorensen. We'll see. Again, it was just week 1. But that defense looked dominant again. And if that's the case, the 49ers, just like anybody else, you win Super Bowls with that defense. The hell with McCaffrey. You got enough offensively. That's not the real concern. If you really want to pull back the layers and talk about whether you're going to be a good or bad football team. It's about that defense. And if they can if Leonard Floyd can actually be that guy who can set the edge, which you haven't had since D Ford, and that defensive line with Collins and Jordan Elliott, if all those guys are legit against the run, then that's how you're going to win that damn Super Bowl. It's not McCaffrey.
Yeah, you always got to win in the trenches, and I think the Niners didn't do that enough last season. For me to feel confident in him. But this year it's a different group. I think, Malik Collins stood out to me. I thought he looked really good up front. I mean, he was tossing around Jets offensive linemen. But I also wasn't necessarily that high on the Jets. So, the defense last year, week 1, looked really good. And that was against a Steelers team that was basically just going to line up with Najee Harris and try and run it down your throat. They couldn't do it. But I think the two newcomers, Malik Collins and then Leonard Floyd, much more diverse. Like, Floyd can get to the quarterback, but also because, Dan, he's really tall and he's extremely long. And he's someone that not only has been on the field for the majority of his career, but he also has eyes in the backfield that feels like it all is tall at all times. He is, I think, what this team has been missing as far as not just a second end opposite Bosa, but also a veteran pass rusher. They really haven't had one probably since D Ford. But he can play the run and the pass, and I'm excited to see what he and Collins continue to do because I did not believe that Malik Collins was that good, but he looked like, just a boulder against the Jets on Monday night. Jordan Elliott, I'm not sure, was incredibly impressive to me, but he's depth. Once they get Gross Matos back, he'll probably be in the rotation as well.
He was good in the preseason.
He was. So, the defensive line was not a concern for me heading into the year, but was something that I was curious about. Felt confident in their
Well, it had to be a concern
secondary.
Because remember how teams were gashing the 49ers, especially towards the end of the year and running the football.
Oh, no. Well, yeah. I just think they were undisciplined last year. Like, they had a lot of undisciplined linemen. I didn't think Chase Young was a disciplined player. Armstead was clearly compromised, and he was hurt. I'm sure they would love to have him back, but it didn't work out. And Bosa at times was undisciplined last year. I just think that someone like Collins and Floyd, though they're not as individually talented as, say, Armstead, or Bosa, they might be more buttoned up, and that's kind of just what you need. I think they need solid defensive line because the moment that Fred Warner gets his eyes on a football, it's his.
He's ridiculous.
Like the ball carrier is going down, and he does not miss tackles. So even though Devondre Campbell, I think it leaves much to be desired opposite Warner, this defensive group is stout.
Before we get out of here, I got to throw you some love here for your. I'm surprised we haven't talked about it. And I'm surprised you've been sitting on this the entire show for your call last week.
Oh, that's
with
right.
The New England Patriots shocking the world in week 1.
That's right. I did call that last week.
And it was Ev that made a point of it to say, watch out for New England against Cincinnati. Joe Burrow historically starts slow, and you like New England. Not only did they cover, but they won outright.
They did win outright, which I told you was a possibility.
What's your sleeper this week?
This week, great question. Honestly, I didn't really look too hard at some of these games. The ones that, so it was mainly about, because I saw that for all the, what is it? Not sleeper polls.
Can the Patriots keep it going and win against the Seattle Seahawks?
By the way, the Patriots started out 2-0 last year. Just a reminder. And then they ended up 3-14 or something.
The Jets beat Buffalo in week 1 last year.
That's true. It was more about, that's right, because 70% of eliminator pools had the Bengals involved in them. So my point was not necessarily just bet the Patriots money line outright, which I did, but also just stay away from the Bengals week 1 because Joe Burrow absolutely stinks. It doesn't matter who they're playing. This week, the team that I would look out for, I would actually, I think the Bears are going to get the Texans on Sunday night.
I thought you were drunk last week.
What?
So dude? I'll hold back. I mean, your call with the Patriots, so you get my respect, but
Houston's 6. I'm looking for kind of bigger spreads that stand out to me. I would take the Bears plus 6.5.
Houston was sort of the sexy pick to get to the Super Bowl out of the AFC this year.
Yeah, I personally don't see it, but that's fine.
Speaking of getting to a Super Bowl,
the lock of the week, by the way, is the Chargers minus
I love
5.
It, a lock.
Minus
the Chargers.
5. All right, this is again.
We need someone with some level of objectivity here.
But it's not so much just like last week did. It wasn't about the Patriots being good. It was about the Bengals being in a spot. And what we learned last week, because I do not think the Saints are very good whatsoever, they blew the brakes off the Carolina Panthers. And so we are going to be fading them until proven otherwise. And that's what it's really all about. It's not about the Chargers, although I was semi-impressed with them last week. It's about how bad the Carolina Panthers are.
You know what was impressive last week was that Joe Alt's real deal, man. I just saw that guy. Somebody ISO'd on him, the kid out of Notre Dame. He was just pancaking people. He's ridiculous.
Speaking of which, I would also like Dallas -6. I think that'd be the team I'm
against who?
The Saints. Dallas is at home against the Saints -6.
All right. You know, by the way, speaking of Super Bowls and getting ahead of ourselves, there was only, to me, 2 dominant teams, 2 dominant wins in week 1. The Niners and Kansas City. So, obviously, it's only week 1. But if
Kansas City, they won by a toe tap.
Yeah, I think it was a good one against Baltimore.
Oh, a good one. Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of just, good play from beginning to end, okay, maybe it's just the Niners. But there wasn't a lot of, decisive where you're like, that's a really good football team.
No, there was a lot of close games, although, I mean, look, to me, I think that's as far as impressive victories. Actually, I mean, the Vikings might have been the most dominant team last week.
Sammy Darnold, baby.
Your boy. So, hey. Well, you got tomorrow, Dan. You going to go on a limb and take the team opposite the Niners again?
No, I like the 49ers winning, but the short week scares me. I'm one of those that just really leans into that. Like a short week now in the NFL, missing that one day. So
this is a game you would not bet if you were to?
No, and if I did, I would take the points, but I think the 49ers, I think it's one of those, it's going to be close and last possession type of things. Like I think the Niners win, but it's going to be very close. That's why I don't like, I would take, if I had to, I would take the points.
The other team, I'm not going to lie, I know they did not look very good last week, but I'm sniffing a Bo Nix upset.
Oh, my God.
The home opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sniffing it, Dan. Okay, all right, we'll give you the underdog money lines here. Bears over Texans, Broncos over Steelers. And
go ahead. Let me hear you go with.
No, I don't have another underdog. I'm going to say Cowboys and Chargers, but the 2 underdog money lines I will be betting on will be the Bears and the Broncos.
Yeah, Bo Nix did not look good either.
No, he did not.
In fact, it just goes.
He can't look any worse.
It just goes to show you none of those guys
did.
The
Steelers kicked 6 field goals last week.
No, Steelers. Listen. The Steelers, I don't think they scored a touchdown.
No, they didn't.
Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, both bad. So, we'll see. All right.
By the way,
so Russ isn't taking on Denver. That sucks.
Wait, what? What do you mean?
Russell Wilson.
Why do you want to see Russell Wilson?
You
were the one that called Justin Fields being the starter anyways.
No, but I just think the scenario of him playing, let's ride and going back to Denver would have been fun.
I'm sure Denver's happy they don't have to see him either. Well, actually, maybe they want him on the field for the other team. I don't know. I mean, they're trying to bench him to basically save themselves some money last year. This was a guy. Oh, you talking about redemption stories and quarterbacks and don't write him off? You wrote off Russell Wilson in Seattle.
Oh, that's because he's old and garbage.
Well, but he wasn't 4 years ago.
Well, 3 years ago, he was still getting... Well,
coming off of poor seasons, but...
Yeah, all right. No, the cancel culture when it comes to quarterbacks. Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith...
Jimmy Garoppolo.
I wasn't going Jimmy G. But I'm not done with Jimmy G. He will get another opportunity. All right, that'll do it for all of us. We'll see you back here next week, Big Chick.
By the way, tomorrow, beginning at
Let's go ahead.
8 a.m., the kickoff
8 o'clock
show.
Tomorrow, it's the kickoff show.
Devin
You and
Giddings,
Low Neal.
Lorenzo Neal, right here.
Don't forget, 95.7 The Game is where you start your football Sunday locally. 8 o'clock, it's Evan Giddings, it's Low Neal. They'll prep you for kickoff, which will be at 10 a.m. It's the Niners, it's the Vikings, and then afterwards, of course, we'll have the post-game show, and then we'll talk about it all next week, and Ev and I will be back after it next Saturday. Until then, enjoy the weekend, everybody. So long.
So what are you reading?
I'm checking out the ratings on the new TVs, and it looks like Samsung, LG, and Sony got the best score.